After 12 years of being banned from seeing my grandchildren, my son and daughter-in-law suddenly showed up at the door of my newly purchased mansion on a cold, rainy night with 12 suitcases. My son smiled and said, "We're family. You can't seriously expect us to stay in a hotel when you have all these empty rooms." But what they didn't know was that for months I had installed hidden cameras throughout the house, locked every asset into an ironclad trust fund, and waited for the exact day they would come back for my money. I'm glad you're here for this one. Quick pause before we continue. Leave a comment and tell me what you're doing right now. Are you cooking, commuting, or maybe just taking a quiet moment? I read every response. A quick note, certain details are fictionalized for storytelling, but the lesson at the heart of this, that's what truly matters. I was 72 when I discovered my son had systematically erased me from existence. I learned it from a neighbor, Garrett, who stopped by on a cold Illinois afternoon holding a six-pack and making casual small talk. "Caught your son's Christmas live stream," Garrett said blindly. "Those grandkids are getting big. That other grandfather looked like he was having the time of his life." The words hit me like a physical blow. Other grandfather. 2 weeks prior, I had shipped carefully wrapped holiday gifts to Toronto, tracking them online until they showed delivered. I had rationalized the subsequent silence, telling myself the kids were just too busy to call. Now my chest tightened. After Garrett left, I searched Facebook and found my son Desmond's holiday video. There they were, my 15-year-old granddaughter Aria and 9-year-old Felix, shouting, "Thanks, Grandpa," as they hugged a silver-haired stranger in an expensive sweater. Desmond and his wife stood by beaming. The comments praised their wonderful grandfather. This wasn't the natural drift of a distant family. This was deliberate replacement. In the gathering twilight, I went to my hallway closet and pulled down a heavy cardboard box. I dumped its contents onto the carpet. Inside lay dozens of packages I had sent over 12 years, all addressed in my careful handwriting to my grandchildren's verified Toronto homes. Every single one bore a brutal stamp: refused, return to sender. I picked up the oldest, a third birthday gift for Aria from June 2014. Refused. A toy truck for Felix from 2015. Returned. 23 packages in total, spanning over a decade of birthdays and Christmases. The addresses had always been correct. Someone at that house had looked at my name year after year and rejected my love, ensuring I remained a ghost to my grandchildren. Sitting on the floor amid the evidence of my own erasure, surrounded by the ghosts of 12 stolen years, I listened to the snow fall outside. The immediate shock faded into a haunting, burning question. Why? The next morning I didn't cry, I built a case. I spent that Friday night on my living room floor, surrounded by returned packages. But by Saturday morning, I'd moved past shock into something colder and more useful: documentation. Grief is a luxury. Evidence is a weapon. Iris Whitfield found me at the kitchen table at 7 a.m., sorting postal receipts into chronological order. She'd kept my household running for 3 years with quiet efficiency and a sharp eye that missed nothing, including the fact that I hadn't slept. "You're going to the post office," she said, not a question. "I need official records," I told her. "Everything they have." "Then I'm driving," she said, already reaching for her coat. "You look like you'd run a red light and not notice." The Lake Forest post office on a January Saturday morning smelled like old radiator heat and the particular mustiness of government buildings that haven't been renovated since 1987. Harold Benson, the postal clerk, with 30 years behind that counter, looked up from his crossword puzzle as we approached. "Mr. Frost," he said, recognizing me from years of package shipments. Then he saw my face, and his expression shifted. "What do you need?" "I'm tracking records," I said, sliding a handwritten list across the counter. Every package I've sent to these Toronto addresses over the past 12 years. Official copies. Dated, stamped, certified. Harold's eyebrows climbed toward his receding hairline. That's going to be a lot of records. I know. He disappeared into the back room. I heard the printer warming up, that distinctive whirring sound that means bureaucracy is about to produce evidence. Iris stood beside me, silent, her presence a kind of solidarity that required no words. 20 minutes later, Harold returned with a stack of papers 3 inches thick. His face had gone pale. "Mark, Mr. Frost," he said quietly, setting the stack down like it might explode. "I've never seen anything like this. Every package to these addresses, every single one refused. For 12 years straight, I started reading. Each page documented a small death tracking numbers, delivery attempts, refusal stamps. The pattern emerged like a hidden picture in one of those optical illusions where you have to unfocus your eyes to see the truth. 3 different addresses," Iris said quietly beside me, reading over my shoulder. They moved and kept refusing. She was right. The first address, a modest Toronto suburb, covered 2011 through 2015. Then a nicer neighborhood from 2016 through 2019. The current address, the one I'd seen in Desmond's live stream from 2020 onward. Each time my son moved, the erasure moved with him. 3 addresses, 12 years, 147 refused packages. The complete official postal record spanning 12 years, every address, every attempt. "Now I need official copies," I told Harold, my voice steadier than I felt. "Everything. Certified mail receipts, tracking confirmations, refusal documentation. Notarized if possible." Harold nodded slowly. "This is going to take me about an hour to process properly. You want to wait, or should I call you?" "I'll wait," I said. Iris and I sat in the post office's plastic chairs for 53 minutes while Harold worked. Neither of us spoke. What was there to say? The evidence was speaking for itself in dot matrix printer fonts and official postal service stamps. When Harold finally handed me the manila envelope, thick, heavy, official, he looked at me with something between pity and professional horror. "I don't know what this is about," he said, "but I'm sorry." I carried that envelope like it was made of nitroglycerin. 9 days later, I sat in Vivian Langley's downtown Chicago office, surrounded by heavy legal volumes and the smell of expensive coffee. She was 52, my estate attorney, with steel gray hair, pulled back in a style that suggested she didn't have time for nonsense and wouldn't tolerate it if she did. I'd found her through a referral from my accountant, after my wife passed 5 years earlier. She'd handled the estate with such ruthless efficiency that I'd kept her on retainer, updating my will annually, never imagining I'd need her for this. She listened without interrupting as I laid out the evidence, the returned packages, the postal records, the Christmas livestream with its replacement grandfather. Her expression never changed, but I watched her hands. They moved from casual note-taking to precise, angry printing as the story unfolded. "You're building a fortress before the siege," she said when I finished. "Smart. Most clients come to me after the damage is done." "If they ever come back," I said carefully, "I won't be defenseless." Vivian leaned forward, her gray eyes sharp as scalpels. "They will come back, Stanley. And I need you to understand something important. They won't come back for reconciliation. They'll come back for access. Access to what? To whatever you have that they want. Money, property, power of attorney while you're still breathing, or inheritance rights when you're not." She pulled out a yellow legal pad and started sketching. "We're going to build you a legal fortress. Preemptive conditional trusts for the grandchildren. Ironclad anti-POA abuse clauses. Scheduled mental competency evaluations, starting now, establishing a paper trail of your cognitive function." "Why mental competency?" "Because that's the weapon they'll use," she said bluntly. They'll claim you're declining incompetent need guardianship. If you wait until they make the claim to get evaluated, it looks defensive. If you have quarterly evaluations starting now, it looks like prudent planning. How do you armor yourself against people who share your blood? Vivian must have seen something in my face because her expression softened slightly. Stanley, I've been doing estate law for 26 years. I've seen families destroy each other over everything from millions to a mother's wedding ring. The moment you become wealthy, they will come looking, and they'll bring weapons you haven't imagined. I thought about the corporate acquisition offer sitting in my home office desk drawer. The one I hadn't told anyone about yet. The one that would turn my modest manufacturing consulting firm into a $24 million windfall. How soon can we start the evaluations? I asked. I'll have my assistant schedule the first one for next week, she said. And Stanley, whatever's coming, whatever made you walk into my office today, I want you to know we're going to be ready. Vivian's warning hung in the air between us like a prophecy. I didn't tell her that the corporate acquisition offer was already sitting on my desk waiting for my signature. I didn't tell her that the fortress we were building wasn't theoretical. The siege was already beginning. I spent February turning my home into a courtroom where every word would be recorded and every lie would leave evidence. 3 weeks after leaving Vivian's office, I signed the corporate acquisition papers. $24 million for a manufacturing consulting firm I'd built over 37 years, sold to a conglomerate that wanted our client list and industry relationships more than our physical assets. The wire transfer would hit my account in 90 days pending regulatory approval. 90 days to build a fortress. The cameras arrived on a Tuesday in mid-February, delivered in discreet brown boxes that Iris helped me carry inside. 8 units total professional-grade high definition, with night vision and audio that could pick up a whisper from across the room. Not the cheap security cameras you buy at big-box stores. These were the kind that produced court-admissible evidence. I installed them myself over 3 days. Living room 2 cameras covering different angles, ensuring no blind spots near the fireplace or seating areas. Kitchen 1 camera positioned to capture the entire room and the entrance to the dining area. Hallway cameras aimed at both ends recording who came and went. Dining room a single camera with a wide lens that could document an entire gathering. I avoided the bedrooms and bathrooms privacy laws, yes, but also strategy. I wanted everything I recorded to be unquestionably legal beyond any challenge that I'd violated reasonable expectations of privacy. Every camera was mounted openly with small red recording lights that blinked like tiny accusatory eyes. Iris found me in the hallway on the 3rd afternoon, balancing on a stepladder while I adjusted the final camera angle. "You're building a record that can't be disputed," she said. Smart. I climbed down, tested the camera's field of view on my phone. If they come, I want every word captured, every threat, every manipulation, all of it. Then you'll need a witness, she said. Someone who can testify that the cameras were recording exactly what happened. No editing, no selective footage. I'd already thought of that. Vivian had drafted the document, a formal witness agreement, that would make Iris an objective observer to all household interactions legally documented and notarized. Iris read it carefully, her reading glasses perched on her nose. "This says I'll maintain contemporaneous logs of any significant interactions cross-referenced with camera timestamps. It means if they try to claim the footage is fake or doctored, you'll be able to testify to what actually happened." I explained. "You'd be the human verification of the electronic record." She signed without hesitation. "Then I'll make sure nothing happens in this house without documentation. Every camera was a witness that couldn't be intimidated, bribed, or gaslit." The system went live on February 23rd. I tested it obsessively, walking through rooms, having conversations with Iris, checking that the audio picked up normal speech without distortion, verifying that the night vision worked when I killed the lights. The footage uploaded automatically to a cloud server that Vivian's firm managed, creating backups that couldn't be physically destroyed, even if someone smashed every camera in my house. I was building evidence before the crime had even been committed. In March, I drove to Lloyd Mercer's medical clinic for what would be the first of many evaluations. Lloyd was 68, my oldest friend, someone I'd known since we were both young men trying to figure out how to build lives that mattered. He'd become the most respected physician in 3 counties. I'd built and sold manufacturing businesses. We'd taken different roads but stayed in touch through holiday cards and occasional lunches that stretched into 3-hour conversations. His clinic occupied a renovated Victorian house on the north side of Lake Forest, all hardwood floors and medical equipment that looked too modern for the century-old architecture. Lloyd met me in his office, not an exam room, which told me he understood this wasn't a routine checkup. "Shakazium." Vivian sent me the protocol, he said, gesturing to a thick folder on his desk. "Comprehensive cognitive assessment, psychiatric screening, executive function evaluation. She's very thorough. She said I need a baseline," I told him. "Documentation that I'm competent now, so if someone claims otherwise later, they'll have to prove you declined dramatically," Lloyd finished. "And they won't be able to. Let's get started." The evaluation took 2 hours. Memory tests reciting lists of words, remembering sequences, recalling details from stories he read aloud. Problem-solving logic puzzles, pattern recognition, mathematical reasoning. Psychiatric screening questions about mood, anxiety, decision-making, social function. Lloyd documented everything with the precision that had made him successful. Notes, scores, observations, all typed into a medical record that would become legal evidence. When we finished, he leaned back in his chair and smiled. "Your cognitive function is exceptional for 72 Stanley. I'm documenting everything, executive function, memory, judgment, all superior. If someone tries to claim you're declining, they'll need to explain how you scored in the 95th percentile for your age group." "If someone tries to claim I'm incompetent," I asked. His smile faded. "They'll have to get through me, and this record." He paused, his expression turning serious. "But listen, I need you to understand something. I've seen this before. Predatory guardianship, financial exploitation of the elderly. It almost always follows the same pattern." "What pattern?" "Someone shows up, usually family, and demands urgent signatures," Lloyd said, leaning forward. "Legal documents, power of attorney, property transfers. They create pressure, confusion, manufactured emergency. They say things like, 'We need this signed right now,' or 'the lawyer is waiting,' or 'if you don't sign this today, terrible things will happen.' That's the moment. That's when they strike. You don't prepare for a siege by hoping the walls hold you. Prepare by making the walls unbreakable." "What should I do if that happens?" I asked. Lloyd's eyes locked on mine. "Call me immediately, before you sign anything. I don't care if it's 3 in the morning. I don't care if they're standing right there insisting it's urgent. You call me first. I'll come to you, I'll evaluate you on the spot, and I'll document that you were or weren't under duress, that you were or weren't competent to sign. They won't be able to claim later that you didn't understand what you were doing." He handed me a card with his personal cell phone number written on the back. "If anyone demands urgent signatures," he said quietly, "call me immediately." I drove home with Lloyd's warning echoing in my mind. Urgent signatures, pressure, manufactured confusion. He'd just described the exact playbook they would use. Now I knew the attack plan before the enemy even arrived. 6 months before Garrett walked through my door with that devastating news, the whispers had already begun. I need to go back to understand how I knew to build those defenses, to install those cameras, to document everything before the attack came. The story doesn't start with discovery. It starts with warning signs I almost missed. August 2022. A Tuesday afternoon unseasonably cool for Illinois summer. I was sitting in a booth at Miller's Diner on Route 41, the kind of place with laminated menus and coffee that tastes like it's been sitting on the burner since dawn. I'd agreed to meet two former business associates, Tom Reichert and Paul Sutton, who wanted to pick my brain about a construction project they were bidding on. We talked about permits and contractor relationships and material costs, the kind of shop talk that comes easily after 4 decades in manufacturing. Then Tom leaned back, wiped bacon grease off his fingers, and said it casually, like he was commenting on the weather. "She heard through the grapevine that consolidated land made you quite an offer, Stan." That true. I kept my face neutral, took a sip of terrible coffee. "Just exploring options. Nothing final," Paul laughed. "Come on, Stan. Word is they're throwing serious money at you for the client list and contracts. Good for you, brother. You earned it." I deflected with vague answers about due diligence and regulatory approvals, steered the conversation back to their construction bid, got out of there as quickly as politeness allowed. But driving home in my truck, my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. If they knew in Lake Forest, if casual acquaintances were hearing industry gossip about my company sale, then the information was out there. Floating through business channels, spreading through professional networks. And if it was spreading here, it could easily reach Toronto. If they know in Illinois, I said aloud to my empty truck, Desmond could know in Toronto. The thought sat in my gut like a stone. My son hadn't spoken to me in 3 years at that point. No calls, no emails, no acknowledgement of the birthday cards I still sent. Radio silence so complete it felt deliberate. And now potentially he might be hearing that his estranged father was about to come into significant money. I should have felt paranoid for even thinking it. Instead, I felt something closer to certainty. What do you call it? When someone erases you while you're still breathing, still trying, still loving them. 4 months later, in mid-December, I got my answer. I was sitting in my living room on a Thursday evening, the kind of quiet winter night where the cold seeps through the windows and the house feels larger and emptier than it actually is. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda Morrison, someone I'd worked with years ago who'd stayed loosely in touch. The message was brief. "Saw this on Facebook. Thought you should know they're doing well." Attached was a screenshot, Desmond's social media page. The post was dated December 22nd, 2022, 3 days ago. The image showed my son, his wife Celeste, and my grandchildren arranged in front of an extravagant Christmas tree that probably cost more than most families spend on presents. Aria was 15, beautiful, wearing a red dress I'd never seen. Felix was 9, gap-toothed smile, holding what looked like an expensive gaming system. They looked happy. They looked perfect. And I wasn't in the picture. The caption read, "Perfect family Christmas with the ones who matter. #blessed, #family first, #Christmas magic." I read it 3 times each reading, driving the knife deeper. "Perfect family Christmas with the ones who matter," I said aloud to my empty living room. The ones who matter. I was alive. I was 71 years old, living 90 minutes away by plane, still sending gifts that came back marked, refused, still hoping for reconciliation that never came. And they were posting pictures captioned with deliberate exclusion, public erasure, a message to the world that their family was perfect without me in it. I set the phone down carefully like it might shatter. For 12 years, I'd told myself stories to make the rejection bearable. He's busy. He's angry about something I can't remember doing. He needs space. The grandchildren are young, and when they're older, they'll reach out. Time heals. Distance softens. People change. But this wasn't distance. This wasn't anger that might cool. This was calculated. This was a man posting a family photo while his father was still alive, and trying to connect deliberately, excluding him publicly, declaring that he didn't matter. Not #family time. not hashtag holiday season. The ones who matter. I sat in the darkness for a long time, the phone screen dimming, the screenshot still visible in my messages. The perfect tree, the perfect smiles, the perfect lie, perfect family, perfect tree, perfect lie. Somewhere in that darkness, something hardened in my chest. Not anger, I'd passed through anger years ago. This was colder, clearer, strategic. The corporate acquisition wasn't final yet, but it would be soon. Regulatory approval was moving through channels. Within months, maybe weeks, I'd have more money than I'd ever imagined earning. Not wealth that changes generations, but enough to make me a target. And if Desmond had heard about the sale, if those industry whispers had reached him, then he knew. He knew his father, the one who didn't matter, was about to have something worth taking. I opened my laptop, the blue glow harsh in the dark room. "The money isn't for you, Desmond," I whispered. "It never will be." I created a new document, titled it simply, and started typing notes. Not a formal trust yet that would require Vivian's expertise, legal precision, ironclad language. But the framework, the intention, the decision. Trust for grandchildren draft, protective provisions, anti-abuse clauses, conditions that would ensure Arya and Felix inherited what I'd built, regardless of what their father tried to do. Money their parents couldn't touch, couldn't manipulate, couldn't steal. This wasn't about revenge. Revenge would be cutting Desmond off and telling him why, forcing confrontation, demanding acknowledgement. This was about protection, about ensuring that when they came for the money, and I knew now with absolute certainty they would come, they'd find it was already beyond their reach. I sat in the darkness of my living room, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating my hands as I typed. Outside, snow began to fall. Inside, I was building something they wouldn't see until it was too late. The pieces were moving into position. I just didn't know yet that in 1 month, Garrett would walk through my door and confirm everything I'd feared. The pen felt heavier than it should have when I signed the papers that made me worth $24 million. 3 months after drafting that initial trust framework in my darkened living room, the abstract plan became concrete reality. March 20th, 2023. A Tuesday morning in downtown Chicago, inside a corporate boardroom that smelled like expensive leather and the particular brand of confidence that comes from moving large sums of money between entities. Vivian sat beside me at the mahogany conference table, her briefcase open, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed the closing documents with the kind of attention that made me grateful I'd hired her. Across from us sat 3 executives from Consolidated Land, gray suits, practiced smiles, the choreographed warmth of people who'd done this dozens of times before. The lead executive, a woman in her 50s named Patricia something or other, slid the final signature page across the table. "Mr. Frost," she said, "congratulations. 24 million is a remarkable outcome. You've earned a comfortable retirement." I signed my name in the spaces Vivian had marked with yellow tabs. My handwriting looked surprisingly steady for a man whose entire life had just changed. When the last signature was complete, when the documents were gathered, and Patricia was extending her hand for a congratulatory shake, I turned to Vivian and asked the question I'd been holding since we walked into the building. How do I ensure this money protects my grandchildren from their own parents? The room went quiet. Patricia's hand hung in the air mid-shake, her smile frozen in professional confusion. The other executives exchanged glances. Vivian looked at me over her reading glasses, and I saw something like approval in her expression. "You don't celebrate wealth," she said quietly. "You weaponize it. I respect that." We left the boardroom 20 minutes later with wire transfer confirmations and documents that would take weeks to process fully. But the money was real. The number in my account, minus taxes, minus fees, minus all the institutional takes, was more than I'd earned in my entire life before this moment. Most men my age dream of wealth as freedom. I saw it as armor artillery and a fortress wall. The trust documents are already drafted, Vivian said as we walked to the parking garage. Irrevocable with conditions that protect Arya and Felix until they're 25. Your son can't touch it. His wife can't touch it. No power of attorney, no guardianship claim, no legal maneuvering will breach those walls. When can we finalize it? I can give me 2 weeks to incorporate the final numbers and file with the courts. She paused at her car, studying me. Stanley, most people who come into sudden wealth make themselves targets. You're making yourself a fortress. That's either very paranoid or very smart. Which do you think it is? I think you know something about your family that I don't, she said. And I think you're preparing for a war. She wasn't wrong. 3 weeks later, on April 10th, I stood in the foyer of the Lake Forest estate I'd just purchased. The property sat on 2 acres of prime lakefront land, a sprawling home that had once belonged to a pharmaceutical executive who'd retired to Arizona. It was far larger than I needed, far grander than anything I'd imagined owning, but it had something I required: space. Enough rooms to preserve what needed preserving. Enough isolation to control who came and went. Enough visible wealth to serve as bait. Iris walked through the empty rooms with me that first afternoon, her footsteps echoing on hardwood floors that hadn't been refinished since the 90s. It's bigger than I expected, she said. The East Wing, I told her. I want to preserve it exactly as planned. We spent the next week setting it up. 2 bedrooms side by side connected by a Jack and Jill bathroom. One room in soft purple and gray, Arya's colors based on a social media post I'd seen where she wore a purple sweater. One room in navy and green, Felix's, from a photo where he wore a green jacket. Small beds appropriate for the ages they'd been when the erasure began. Bookshelves filled with children's literature organized by reading level from picture books to young adult novels. A desk in each room. A reading chair by each window. And on those shelves stacked carefully every returned package from 12 years of refusals. Still wrapped? Still bearing the stamps that marked them as rejected. Birthday gifts for ages 3 through 15 for Arya. Ages 2 through 9 for Felix. You kept every gift, Iris said, standing in the doorway of Arya's room. Every single one that came back. When they walk into these rooms, I said, I want them to see 12 years of love that never stopped. I want them to understand what was taken from them. 12 years of wrapped gifts. 12 years of hope that never got delivered. Iris touched one of the packages, gently reading the address label. This one is from 2011. She was 3. A dollhouse, I said. Came back marked address unknown, even though I'd verified the address through property records. We didn't talk much after that. There wasn't much to say. The final detail came 2 days later, when the security technician arrived to integrate the new camera system with the estate's existing infrastructure. A young kid, maybe 25, with a tablet and a professional enthusiasm for smart home technology. The doorbell's pretty old, he said, examining the brass button mounted beside the front door. We could upgrade to a video doorbell, integrate it with your security cameras, give you app notifications when someone rings. No, I said. It's just that the chime is... Keep the original doorbell, I interrupted. Don't change the chime. I want to hear it exactly as it is when they arrive. The technician shrugged, made a note on his tablet, moved on to discussing camera placement. But Iris, standing in the hallway behind me, understood. I saw it in her expression when I glanced back. The doorbell wasn't a detail. It was a signal. A specific sound for a specific arrival. As if I was waiting for a knock, I'd know when I heard it. Because I was... The estate stood ready by late April. Cameras in every common room, recording constantly, uploading to servers Vivian's firm controlled. Medical documentation filed and notarized, establishing my cognitive competence beyond question. trust documents sealed with quartz, making the money untouchable to anyone except the grandchildren it was meant to protect. Bedrooms preserved like shrines to stolen years. And a doorbell with a resonant chime that would announce the arrival I knew was coming. The fortress was complete. Now I waited to see if they'd walk into the trap. The doorbell rang at exactly 9:30 p.m. on a rain-soaked October night, and I knew before I reached the door that my son had finally come for the money. 6 months I'd lived in the estate, maintaining the preserved rooms, checking the camera feeds, waiting for this specific sound. The chime echoed through the marble-floored entrance hall, that distinctive three-note resonance I'd refused to replace, and everything Lloyd had warned me about, everything Vivian had prepared me for, everything I'd documented and planned, came down to the next 60 seconds. I walked to the security monitor mounted discreetly in the hallway. 4 figures stood under my porch light, rain hammering the overhang above them. A rental car sat in my circular drive trunk, open luggage scattered across the wet pavement. Someone was unloading suitcases in the downpour. I counted them through the rain-streaked camera lens. 12. 12 suitcases for a family of 4. My heart should have been racing. Instead, it beat steady and slow the way it had during important business negotiations, during my wife's final hospital stay, during every moment in my life that mattered. This was just another negotiation, except the stakes were my grandchildren's futures and my own autonomy. I opened the door. My son Desmond stood there, 44 years old, wearing an expensive suit that looked like he'd slept in it, unable to meet my eyes. He'd gained weight since I'd seen him last, not unhealthy weight, just the thickness that comes with middle age and comfortable living. His hair had more gray than I remembered. He looked tired. Beside him stood Celeste. My daughter-in-law, 41, her sharp features arranged in a smile that never reached her eyes. She was beautiful in the way that required constant maintenance, perfect makeup, despite the rain designer coat, manicured nails that drummed against her expensive purse. Those eyes, though, cold, calculating. Already assessing the marble floors, the chandelier, the visible wealth. Behind them, half hidden in the shadows, stood a teenage girl carrying a worn backpack. Aria. 12 years old, and looking exactly like my late wife at that age, same bone structure, same searching intelligence in her eyes. She wasn't smiling. She was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Wariness, curiosity. Something more complicated than either. And then the small boy pushed past his sister's legs, and my heart did something it hadn't done in years. It broke and mended simultaneously. Felix, 9 years old, gap-toothed, soaking wet from helping with the luggage, looked up at me with eyes full of wonder. "Grandpa!" he shouted and ran forward with his arms outstretched. "Grandpa, it's really you." I caught him as he crashed into my legs, his small arms wrapping around my waist, his wet hair soaking into my shirt. He smelled like rain and children's shampoo and something sweet I couldn't identify. He was real, solid. Here. "I've seen pictures," Felix said, looking up at me. "Mom has one on her phone, but she doesn't show it much. Are you really my grandpa? Do you live in this whole house? It's huge. Can I see my room? Do I have a room?" The child was real. The love in his eyes, real. Everything else, performance. Desmond cleared his throat, stepping forward with a rehearsed expression I recognized from every school play he'd ever been, in the one that said he'd practiced this moment. "Dad," he said, "it's been too long. We've done a lot of thinking about family, about what matters. We want to reconnect." I looked at my son over Felix's head. 12 years of returned packages. 12 years of refused calls. 12 years of deliberate erasure. And now, 6 months after I'd become visibly wealthy, he wanted to reconnect. "We know we haven't been in touch. Celeste added her voice, smooth as expensive whiskey. Life got complicated in Toronto. Desmond's business ventures, the children's schooling, my charity work, it all consumed us. But when Desmond told me about this beautiful home, I said we had to come see you. Family should be together. Family should be together. I could have said so many things. I could have asked about the returned packages, about the Christmas live stream with the replacement grandfather, about the 12 years they'd pretended I didn't exist. I could have mentioned the social media post about perfect family Christmas with the ones who matter. Instead, I looked down at Felix, still clinging to my waist, and then at Aria standing in the rain with her worn backpack and complicated eyes. "You're all soaked," I said quietly. "Come inside." Desmond's relief was almost visible. Celeste's smile widened. Aria's expression didn't change. They started bringing in the suitcases. I watched through the open door as Desmond and Celeste made trip after trip from the rental car, dragging luggage across my porch, through my entrance hall, onto my polished marble floors. 12 suitcases. They hadn't come to visit. They'd come to stay. Iris appeared from the kitchen, having heard the doorbell. Her eyes met mine over the growing pile of wet luggage, and I saw the question there. I gave her the smallest nod. She understood. The cameras were recording. Everything was going according to plan. "Felix, honey, stop bothering your grandfather," Celeste said, her tone sweet but firm. "He's an old man. You'll tire him out." Old man. Tired. The narrative was already beginning. I stepped back and opened the door wider, letting them cross the threshold into the home I'd built specifically for this moment. Desmond couldn't meet my eyes as he dragged his third suitcase past me. Celeste smiled that practiced smile and touched my arm with manufactured warmth. "Thank you for welcoming us," she said. "We won't be any trouble. We need family right now. You understand?" Aria was the last to enter, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her shoes leaving wet footprints on my floors. She looked at me as she passed, really looked at me, and I saw something in her expression that her parents lacked: awareness. She knew something was wrong with this picture. I closed the door behind them, the sound echoing through the entrance hall. Desmond mistook my silence for uncertainty. Celeste mistook it for loneliness. But as I watched them drag their 12 suitcases across my polished floors, I wasn't the confused old man they were expecting. I was the judge watching the defendants walk into court. And every word, every gesture, every calculated lie was being recorded in high definition. The first rule of hosting predators is simple: establish your territory before they do. The door clicked shut behind them, sealing us inside the trap I'd spent 6 months preparing. Desmond stood in my entrance hall looking uncertain, Celeste's eyes cataloging visible wealth children hovering near their luggage like refugees. "Let me show you where you'll be staying," I said, voice steady. I led them through the grand foyer past the living room, with floor-to-ceiling windows down the wide hallway toward the guest wing. Iris materialized from the kitchen, a quiet reminder that nothing here happened without witness. "The guest rooms are at this end," I said, gesturing to 3 adjoining bedrooms. "Plenty of space." Celeste's hand trailed along the mahogany banister fingers, assessing quality. "Such a beautiful home, Dad. It must be quite a responsibility. Where do you keep the important papers, deed insurance, just in case there's ever an emergency and we need to help?" 30 minutes in my house, already hunting for documents. "Everything important is secure," I said. "Iris keeps the household running and my attorney handles legal matters." "Chatitam, an attorney," Desmond said, speaking for the first time since entering. "That's good, Dad. Smart. Is the house fully paid off, or are there still property taxes, mortgage payments we should know about? As if my finances were family business after 12 years of silence. I stopped at the junction where the hallway split. Right guest wing. Left my private office and master bedroom. This wing is private, I said, walking to my office door. I pulled the heavy brass key from my pocket, old-fashioned, deliberate, impossible to miss. I inserted the key, turned it slowly, and made direct eye contact with Celeste as the deadbolt slid home with a solid chunk. "I'm sure you understand," I said. "A locked door is the clearest sentence a man can speak without saying a word." Celeste's smile never wavered, but something flickered behind her eyes. Calculation. Recalibration. "Of course," she said smoothly. "Privacy is important. We completely understand." But she didn't understand. Not yet. She thought the locked door meant I had something to hide. She didn't realize it was a message: "I know exactly why you're here." Iris showed them to their rooms. Felix claimed the one with the window seat. Arya took the smallest room farthest from her parents. I watched them unpack their 12 suitcases and said nothing about how long they planned to stay. I went to bed, knowing the cameras had recorded every probing question, every calculation. Day 1 documented. The next morning, I woke to find Arya wandering the hallways. I was in my study when I heard footsteps in the east wing, the preserved wing. Through the security monitor, I watched her pause at the first closed door, hesitate, then turn the handle. I moved quietly, arriving at the doorway as she stepped inside. The room was exactly as I'd designed it. Small bed with purple sheets, shelves lined with books organized by age, a child's desk with colored pencils, and in the corner, stacked carefully wrapped presents with tags in my handwriting. Arya stood frozen, hand covering her mouth. She picked up the first package, hands shaking as she read the tag aloud. "To Arya, happy 5th birthday. Love, Grandpa. September 2016. She set it down, picked up another. "To Arya, Christmas 2017. Love, Grandpa." Another. "To Arya, happy 8th birthday. Love, Grandpa. September 2019. Her voice shook. She turned slowly, surveying the room, the bed sized for a child books. "For every age presents, for every birthday and Christmas. I sent everyone," I said quietly from the doorway. They all came back. Arya spun to face me, tears forming. She held the package from her 8th birthday like evidence. "They told me." Her voice cracked. "They said you walked away. After Grandma died, they said you wanted nothing to do with us. That you never called, never wrote, never cared." I said nothing. The room spoke for itself. She looked around again, really seeing it. The care in every detail. The books chosen for specific ages. The wrapped presents still bearing postal stamps and refused markings. 12 wrapped presents. 12 years of waiting. 12 lies her parents told. "You kept them," she whispered. "All these years." "I kept trying," I said. "Even after they came back. Every birthday, every Christmas. I never stopped." Arya set the package down carefully. When she looked at me again, her expression had changed. The wary distance was gone, replaced by something more complicated. Confusion. Anger. Grief. "What, this room?" she said, gesturing around her. "It's perfect. The books, the desk, even the color purple's my favorite. How did you know?" "Social media," I admitted. "I've been watching from a distance, learning what I could, trying to know you even though we'd never met." Her face crumpled. "They said you abandoned us. I know what they said. But this..." She picked up another package, Christmas 2019. "This was 4 years ago. They were still telling me you didn't care. And you were sending presents. That came back too. Refused. Returned to sender. Every single one." Arya stood there holding proof that shattered 12 years of narrative. Her hands trembled. Her breathing shallow. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Just if you abandoned us," she asked. turning to look at me with eyes exactly like her grandmother's. "Why did you build this room for me?" I didn't answer with words. I just watched as the first seed of doubt took root, watched as the foundation of everything her parents told her began to crack. Upstairs, I could hear Celeste moving through the house, already planning her next move, unaware that her daughter's loyalty had just become uncertain. The best performance of my life began with a trembling hand and a forgotten date. I left Arya standing in that room full of wrapped gifts, her question hanging in the air unanswered. She needed time to process what she'd discovered, and I needed to begin the most dangerous act I'd ever attempted, convincing my son that I was exactly the confused, declining old man he needed me to be. That afternoon, I found them in the kitchen. Desmond reading something on his phone, Celeste examining the contents of my refrigerator like she was cataloging inventory. Perfect. I walked to the counter where Iris had left the wall calendar, one of those old-fashioned paper ones with large numbers. I squinted at it, brought my face close, then stepped back, looking confused. "Is it—" I paused, furrowing my brow. "Is it still September? I thought we just had Labor Day." Desmond's head snapped up. Celeste turned from the refrigerator, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes sharp. "Dad!" Celeste said, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. "It's mid-October. You mentioned this yesterday, too." I hadn't mentioned it yesterday, but now they thought I had. The seed of repeated confusion planted. I moved to make tea, my hands deliberately unsteady. I'd practiced this in my bedroom mirror, not a full shake, nothing theatrical, just the slight tremor that comes with age and uncertainty. I reached for the kettle, let my fingers fumble with the handle, gripped it on the second try. The hot water missed the first cup by half an inch, splashing on the counter. I jerked back, startled by my own mistake, and Iris appeared immediately with a towel. "Let me help you with that," she said, her voice steady. But I caught the way her eyes widened for just a split second. The act was so convincing that even Iris, who knew the truth, who'd watched me plan this for months, had a moment of genuine doubt. That's when I knew the performance was working. Desmond and Celeste exchanged a look. Quick, triumphant, trying to hide it, but not quite succeeding. I saw it in my peripheral vision, kept my eyes on the tea like I was concentrating hard on a simple task. "This is going to be easier than we planned," Desmond whispered to Celeste, barely audible, but the cameras picked it up. Every word. I shuffled to the table with my tea, moving like a man uncertain of his own balance. Sat down heavily. Stared at the calendar again. "October," I said quietly. "Right. October. Acting is just controlled lying. And I'd spent 72 years being too honest." Celeste sat down across from me, her smile practiced and warm. "How are you feeling, Dad? Are you taking your medications?" I didn't take any medications beyond a daily multivitamin, but I nodded vaguely. "I think so," I said. "Iris helps me remember." "That's good," Celeste said. "It's important to have help. At your age, things can get complicated. Documents, finances, medical decisions. It's a lot for one person to manage." There it was, the setup. The groundwork for why I needed someone to take over my affairs. I just nodded and sipped my tea. Desmond watched me with something in his eyes I couldn't quite identify. Not concern, not love. Something more calculating. Like he was assessing how much longer I'd be functional, how quickly he could move. They had no idea that in my bedroom, monitors were recording every word, every glance, every calculating expression. I went to bed early that night claiming fatigue. Shuffled to my room, closed the door, and waited. At 1 a.m., I was sitting in my darkened bedroom, watching the security monitor as Desmond and Celeste stepped into the hallway outside their room. They looked both ways, checking for witnesses. The house was silent. They believed everyone was asleep. Desmond leaned close to Celeste, and through the crystal-clear audio feed, I heard every word. "We take the POA before Halloween." Celeste whispered, her voice urgent. Did you see him today? He's completely gone. The lawyer will have no problem getting it signed. And after we have control, Desmond asked, we move him to that state facility in November. The cheap one. He won't know the difference by then. A state facility. Not a nice private care home. Not somewhere comfortable. The cheapest option that would keep him alive but out of the way. Desmond nodded. How long until the estate sells? If we move fast before Christmas, Celeste said. But we need the POA first. Everything hinges on that. Once we have legal control, he's done. Quentin's arriving within 48 hours, Desmond said. He'll bring the documents. Dad signs, we get it notarized immediately, and by this time next week, Stanley Frost won't legally exist as his own person anymore. Quentin, the corrupt lawyer coming to execute the theft. POA by Halloween. Institutionalized by Thanksgiving. Erased by Christmas. Celeste smiled, and in the green glow of the night vision camera, she looked like something predatory. Your father built a nice life. It's a shame he won't remember losing it. They stood there for another minute discussing logistics, which nursing home, how to liquidate the house quickly, whether they should sell the furniture or just donate it for the tax write-off. Talking about dismantling my life like it was an estate sale. Then they went back to their room, satisfied that their plan was progressing perfectly. I sat in the darkness, watching the empty hallway on the monitor, my hands perfectly steady now. No tremor, no confusion. Just cold, absolute clarity. 48 hours until Quentin Riddle arrived. 48 hours until they tried to steal my legal existence. But they were walking into a trap so comprehensive they couldn't even see the walls closing in. Every word they'd just spoken was recorded in high definition, backed up to secure servers, time-stamped and legally admissible. Every calculated glance from the afternoon was documented. Every moment of their performance as caring family members was captured alongside their whispered plans to warehouse me in the cheapest facility they could find. They thought I was failing. They thought I was confused. They thought I didn't know it was October, couldn't remember what year it was, couldn't pour tea without help. But I knew exactly what month it was, exactly what year, exactly how many days, until they planned to erase me. And I knew something they didn't in 48 hours when Quentin Riddle walked through my door with his forged documents and his corrupt notary stamp. He'd be walking straight into evidence that would destroy them all. In the middle of a war, a 9-year-old asked me a question that nearly broke the part of me I was trying to protect. 48 hours. That's how long I had, until Quentin Riddle arrived with his briefcase full of fraudulent documents. 48 hours to maintain the performance, to keep the cameras recording, to let them incriminate themselves deeper with every whispered plan. But wars don't follow timelines, and children don't wait for convenient moments to ask impossible questions. I was sitting on the weathered wooden bench at the edge of my property, watching October light dance across the lake when Felix found me. He climbed up onto the bench without asking, his small legs swinging above the ground, and for a long moment we just sat there in silence. "Grandpa," he said finally, his voice so quiet I almost missed it over the sound of water lapping against the shore. "Yes, Felix. Daddy said you didn't love us." He wasn't looking at me, just staring out at the lake, like the words were easier if he didn't have to see my face. "That you walked away and never came back. Is that true?" My throat tightened. Every muscle in my body wanted to tell this child the truth, that his father had lied for 12 years, that every birthday and Christmas I'd tried to reach him, that the abandonment had gone the other direction. I wanted to show him the room full of returned packages, wanted to explain that love and proximity aren't the same thing. But he was 9 years old, and he was already caught in a war he didn't understand. I said, my voice rough. Sometimes grown-ups, sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes we get things wrong about each other. He looked up at me, then his eyes searching my face for something I wasn't sure I could give him. "But did you stop loving us?" "No," I said, and it was the truest thing I'd said in days of calculated performance. "I never stopped." He nodded slowly, processing this with the gravity of someone far older than 9. Then he leaned against my shoulder, and I felt something crack in my chest that had nothing to do with strategy or evidence or revenge. I placed my hand on his shoulder. "I'm right here now," I said quietly. "And I promise you I'm not leaving. You can hate the adults who hurt you without destroying the children caught in the crossfire." We sat there for another 10 minutes watching the lake, and I let myself have that moment of genuine connection before I had to put the mask back on. Because in 24 hours, maybe less, this child would watch his parents try to steal everything I had. And I needed to remember why I'd built those ethical boundaries in the first place. The next day, everything accelerated. I was in the living room, pretending to read a newspaper upside down, a nice touch, I thought, very confused elderly man, when Desmond's phone started ringing. Once. Twice. 3 times in rapid succession. He answered the first call, and I watched his face drain of color. "I understand the account is frozen," he said, his voice tight. "But there must be some mistake. No, I can't cover that amount right now." He hung up. The phone rang again immediately. "Yes, this is Desmond Frost." "What do you mean payment due immediately? I need more time." Celeste appeared in the doorway, her expression sharp. "Who keeps calling Chatinota, Toronto?" Desmond said, and the word sounded like a curse. "The creditors. Someone flagged the accounts. They've frozen everything." I watched this unfold with the careful attention of a man who was supposed to be too confused to understand. But I understood perfectly. Whatever financial house of cards my son had built in Toronto was collapsing and collapsing fast. Time for my performance. I pulled out my phone, fumbled with it, like I was struggling to find the right app, and pressed it to my ear even though I wasn't calling anyone. "Hello," I said, my voice uncertain. "The bank calling again. They said something about irregularities. I don't understand what that means." Desmond and Celeste's heads both snapped toward me. "What bank, Dad?" Celeste asked, crossing the room in 3 quick steps. "What are they saying?" I let my hand shake, lowered the phone like I'd already hung up or forgotten I was holding it. "I don't know. They call sometimes. About accounts. I get confused." Celeste grabbed Desmond's arm, pulled him into the hallway. Their whispers were urgent, clipped. I stayed in my chair, newspaper still upside down, phone in hand, playing the role perfectly. Through the doorway I could hear fragments. "Can't wait. Quentin's not here yet. Doesn't matter, we do it ourselves." Celeste strode back into the room, her face a mask of forced calm, but her eyes were calculating and cold. Desmond followed, looking sick. "Dad." Celeste said, her voice honey-sweet. "We need to talk about your finances. There seem to be some complications. We think it would be best if we helped you manage things, just temporarily until everything is sorted out." I blinked at her confused old man. "Manage?" "Legal papers," she said. "Simple documents that let us help you. Protect you from these confusing bank calls." Desmond's phone rang again. He silenced it without looking. Celeste's jaw tightened. She turned to Desmond, and her voice dropped to a harsh whisper that the cameras picked up perfectly. "Forget waiting for Quentin. We execute the trust transfer tonight, right now. We can't afford to wait another day. Not in 48 hours. Not tomorrow. Tonight." The timeline had just compressed from methodical siege to immediate assault. Desmond's financial collapse in Toronto had forced their hand-turned careful predators into desperate ones. And desperate people make fatal mistakes. I sat in my chair, newspaper upside down, phone still in my trembling hand, watching them plan my legal execution for tonight. The cameras were recording. The evidence was mounting. The trap was ready. But they'd moved the timetable up, and that changed everything. The predator they'd been waiting for arrived at my door with a leather briefcase and a smile that made honest people check their wallets. Celeste's demand to execute the transfer tonight had set everything in motion. By 8 p.m. on October 21st, Quentin Riddle was standing in my entrance hall, 47 years old, expensive suit, perfectly styled hair, and the kind of practiced charm that came from years of talking vulnerable people out of their autonomy. Mr. Frost, he said, extending a hand. Quentin Riddle, family law attorney. Your son has asked me to help with some estate planning matters. I shook his hand with my best trembling grip. Confused elderly man. Uncertain, easily manipulated. He followed Desmond and Celeste to the dining room, set his briefcase on my mahogany table like he owned it, and began spreading papers with practiced efficiency. Power of attorney documents, emergency guardianship petitions, trust transfer authorizations, each one requiring my signature. Iris materialized in the kitchen doorway, visible but unobtrusive, bearing witness to every word. Quentin launched into his pitch, immediately speaking in rapid legal jargon designed to confuse and overwhelm. Mr. Frost, these are standard elder care protection documents. Your son explained your recent confusion episodes, forgetting dates, misplacing things. This simply ensures you're protected. The power of attorney allows Desmond to handle financial matters on your behalf when you're not feeling clear-headed. The guardianship petition is just a precautionary measure. Dad, we need to act quickly. Celeste interrupted, her voice urgent. The bank situation, remember the calls about irregularities, sign now so we can help you. Quentin pushed a pen across the table toward my trembling hand. Right here, Mr. Frost. And here, an initial here. I picked up the pen, let it shake in my grip, squinted at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. Then I set the pen down. I think I read somewhere. I paused, looking genuinely confused. Don't I need a doctor to say I need this medical clearance or something? Quentin's smile never wavered, but something flickered behind his eyes. That's not strictly necessary for voluntary... No, I'm sure I read it. I insisted, my voice gaining a thread of stubborn clarity that even confused old men sometimes manage. Something about doctors needing to certify before guardianship. I don't want to sign wrong things. Desmond leaned forward. Dad, Quentin is an attorney. He knows what's legal. But I should check with Lloyd, I said. Dr. Mercer, he's my doctor. He'd know if I need this, wouldn't he? The room went very quiet. Celeste's jaw tightened. Quentin glanced at Desmond, a quick look that said this wasn't going according to script. We can certainly consult with your physician, Quentin said smoothly. But given the urgency of the financial situation, tomorrow, I said, pushing the unsigned papers back across the table. I'll call Lloyd tomorrow. Ask him if I need guardianship. Legal predators hunt the vulnerable, but they panic when their prey turns out to have teeth. Quentin left 20 minutes later, his briefcase full of unsigned documents, his smile tight. Desmond looked sick. Celeste's fury was a palpable thing in the air. I went to bed satisfied that the cameras had recorded every moment of attempted coercion. The next morning, Lloyd Mercer arrived unannounced. I'd called him at 6 a.m., used the phrase we'd agreed on months ago. I think I need a house call. Code for bring everything. He showed up at 9:30 carrying a thick medical file and the gravitas of a man who'd spent 4 decades earning the trust of 3 counties. Desmond and Celeste were still at breakfast when he walked into the living room. I'm Dr. Lloyd Mercer, he said, his voice professionally neutral. Mr. Frost's personal physician for 40 years. I understand there are concerns about his cognitive capacity. Quentin, who'd returned that morning for another attempt, stood up from the couch. Doctor, the family has documented recent episodes of confusion. We're pursuing protective guardianship. Then you'll want to see these, Lloyd interrupted, spreading papers across the coffee table with methodical precision. Comprehensive cognitive evaluations, memory tests, executive function assessments, psychiatric screenings. Each one dated notarized certified, March 2023, June 2023, September 2023. A pattern of regular evaluations spanning the entire year. Una mini mental state examination, Lloyd said, pointing to one document. Score 29 out of 30. That's superior function for his age group. He pulled out another page. Executive function assessment. Problem-solving, decision-making judgment. All rated superior. Another document. Psychiatric screening. No signs of dementia, no cognitive decline, no impairment that would justify guardianship intervention. Quentin's confident smile was evaporating like morning fog. Doctor, he said, scrambling, recent episodes of confusion have been documented by the family, forgetting what month it is, struggling with simple tasks. Lloyd cut him off with the precision of a surgeon. Any involuntary guardianship petition will face these medical records in court. Memory superior. Executive function superior. Judgment intact. There is no legal basis for claiming incompetence. 40 years of trust, dozens of evaluations, one unbreakable medical record. Celeste's face had gone white with barely contained fury. Desmond looked like he might be sick. Quentin was already packing his briefcase, the body language of a lawyer who knew when a strategy was dead. Ma, these evaluations would be challenged, Quentin tried weakly. By whom? Lloyd asked. I've been his physician for 4 decades. My records are comprehensive, contemporaneous, and medically sound. No court in Illinois would grant guardianship over this evidence. The room fell silent except for the sound of papers being gathered. Quentin whispered something to Celeste. Her eyes narrowed, calculating new angles, new approaches. Desmond stood there looking defeated. Then Desmond's jaw tightened. He looked at Quentin, at Celeste, and something seemed to harden in his expression. She's fine, he said through gritted teeth. A voluntary trust, then, tomorrow night. No guardianship, no medical claims, just a simple voluntary transfer of assets for estate planning purposes. Quentin nodded. That's a more viable approach. Celeste's smile was cold. Family meeting tomorrow night. All of us. We'll discuss Stanley's wishes for his estate, and he can make his own voluntary decisions about who should manage things. They were abandoning force for manipulation. The guardianship trap had failed, so they'd pivot to emotional coercion, family pressure, manufactured urgency. Tomorrow night. The confrontation was set, and every word of their new strategy was being recorded. Some truths arrive not in confessions, but in cardboard boxes hidden in basements, waiting to destroy everything you thought you knew. The guardianship strategy had failed. Lloyd's medical records had demolished their involuntary approach, forcing them to pivot to tomorrow night's voluntary trust manipulation. But before that confrontation could arrive, Arya found the letters. I was in my office on October 23rd when I heard footsteps on the basement stairs, light, careful, exploratory. Through the security monitor, I watched Arya navigate the storage area, running her hands along shelves, opening doors, searching. She found the cardboard box tucked behind my old business files, marked with dates in my handwriting, 2008 to 2023. She lifted the lid. Inside were letters, dozens of them. Pristine white envelopes, each bearing Canadian customs stamps, each marked with red ink that screamed rejection. Refused. Return to sender. Address unknown. I watched through the camera as she picked up the first one, her hands shaking as she read the address label aloud, though I couldn't hear her voice through the monitor. Her lips formed the words, "To Aria 10th birthday." She picked up another, and another. The pile grew around her as she sat on the concrete floor, surrounded by 12 years of documented love meeting systematic rejection. Each envelope had notes in my handwriting, dates, sent dates, returned, tracking numbers. A paper trail so comprehensive it could withstand any courtroom scrutiny. But I hadn't built it for court. I'd built it because I couldn't let go of the hope that someday, somehow, they'd want to know I'd tried. 12 years of love carefully documented. 12 years of rejection methodically executed. Iris appeared in the basement doorway. Through the monitor, I watched my granddaughter look up, tears streaming down her face. Holding a letter addressed to her 8th grade graduation, returned unopened, marked refused, I turned off the monitor. Some moments weren't meant to be surveillance. Some grief needed privacy. 20 minutes later, Aria appeared at my office door, the box of letters clutched against her chest. You wrote to me," she said, her voice raw. "Every birthday, every Christmas, every time something important happened. I set down my pen. I did, and they sent them all back." "Yes." She set the box on my desk carefully, like it held something fragile and irreplaceable, which in a way it did. "I found one from when I turned 13, she said. "You congratulated me on getting into advanced math. How did you even know I liked math? And your school posts honor roll lists online," I said quietly. "I checked every quarter." Her face crumpled. "They told me you didn't care. That after Grandma died, you just checked out, moved on, forgot we existed." "I never forgot," I said. "Not for a single day." She stood there, this 15-year-old girl, processing a decade and a half of lies, and I saw her childhood understanding of her family shatter like glass. "Tomorrow night," she said finally. "This family meeting they're planning. What are they going to try?" "They're going to ask me to sign papers," I told her honestly. "Documents that would give them control of everything I own." "Are you going to sign?" "No." She nodded slowly, then picked up the box and left without another word. The next night, Desmond found me in the living room. Celeste had taken the children out for dinner, a calculated move to have private time with me before tomorrow's main event. But Desmond couldn't wait. The pressure of his collapsing Toronto finances, the failed guardianship strategy, the ticking clock, it had wound him too tight. "We need to talk," he said, closing the door behind him. "About tomorrow night's meeting," I asked, "and about what you owe me." I set down my book, waited. He started pacing, that same restless energy I'd seen when he was a teenager, trying to justify something he knew was wrong. "Do you know what it was like?" he demanded. "Having a father who came to school functions smelling like dirt, who showed up to my graduation in a flannel shirt because he didn't own a suit. You embarrassed me my entire childhood. I worked 14-hour days to put you through that school," I said quietly. "And I spent 14 years being ashamed," he shot back. "The other kids had fathers who were doctors, lawyers, executives. Mine had soil under his fingernails and talked about manufacturing contracts. Do you have any idea what that does to a kid? Ma, so you cut me out of your life because I embarrassed you. You don't understand," he said, his voice bitter. "I built something in Toronto, a reputation, a life. I couldn't have you showing up reminding everyone where I came from. I never asked to show up," I said. "I sent letters, gifts. I would have settled for a phone call on my birthday." He waved that away like it was irrelevant. "That's why you owe me. Financial compensation for the psychological damage of being raised working class. You're sitting on millions now, money that should have been mine years ago, the morning after the funeral, the morning after burying his wife, the morning after his world ended." I looked at this stranger wearing my last name and asked the question I'd been holding for 12 years. "When did you delete my number, Desmond?" When exactly did you decide I didn't exist? He stopped pacing. For a moment, something flickered across his face, not shame, not regret, but calculation. Deciding whether honesty served his interests. Then he answered with absolute coldness. The morning after Mom's funeral. The room went very quiet. So you were grieving, he said, as if explaining something obvious. Weak, vulnerable. Celeste said that was the perfect time to make a clean break. You'd be too broken to fight it, and by the time you recovered, we'd be gone. I stared at him. This person who shared my DNA, this person I'd raised, educated, loved. You cut me off the morning after I buried your mother, I said slowly. The day after my wife of 43 years died. You decided that was the right moment to erase me. It was strategic, he said without remorse. Clean break. No messy goodbyes. There is a moment when you realize there is no path to redemption. No words that will bridge the gap. No love that will overcome the fundamental difference in how two people see the world. This was that moment. Upstairs, Arya now knew about the letters. She knew about 12 years of lies. And sitting in front of me was the man who'd orchestrated it all, demanding payment for the crime of being a working-class father who loved him. At midnight on October 25th, I stopped defending and started hunting. Desmond's admission still echoed in my mind that he'd erased me the morning after my wife's funeral at the moment I needed family most. There is a point where strategy becomes justice, where protection becomes prosecution. I'd passed that point. I locked my office door, drew the curtains, and initiated an encrypted video call. Vivian's face appeared on my screen, sharp and alert despite the hour. I'm activating the irrevocable trust, I said without preamble. Full disinheritance of Desmond, complete protection for Arya and Felix, every asset secured with anti-exploitation clauses that would take a team of lawyers 5 years to even challenge. Vivian leaned forward, her expression shifting from professional to engaged. You're done defending. I'm done being prey, I corrected. I want a complete dossier of evidence. Every camera recording, every medical evaluation, every postal receipt. Everything we've documented for the past 8 months. For court? For exposure, I said. I want them to confess their own greed in front of witnesses they can't intimidate. Not just legal victory, I want truth on record. She nodded slowly. You're building a public tribunal. Disguised as a family dinner, I said. Elite witnesses. Social consequences they can't escape even if they avoid legal ones. I want to expose the predation, not just defend against it. That's a shift from protection to offense, Vivian said. You understand what you're doing. You're not just securing assets, you're destroying relationships permanently. The relationship was destroyed the morning after my wife's funeral, I said quietly. I'm just documenting the corpse. She was silent for a moment, then nodded. I'll have the dossier ready in 72 hours. Complete evidence package indexed and cross-referenced. Medical, financial, documentary proof of systematic alienation and attempted exploitation. I called Lloyd next. He answered on the second ring alert. Doctors learned to wake quickly. Sakin, I need you as an official witness, I told him. 3 days from now. Be ready to present your medical evaluations in a social setting, not just a courtroom. You're going public, he said. I'm forcing them to reveal themselves in front of people who matter in Lake Forest society. I confirmed. People whose judgment they can't escape. I'll be there, Lloyd said, with every document that proves you're the sanest man in the room. Defense builds walls. Offense burns the siege camp to the ground. I spent the next hour drafting the framework. Guest list, former business associates, neighbors, people who'd known my wife. People who remembered me before the erasure. Witnesses who couldn't be intimidated or bought. Menu expensive, but not ostentatious. Professional catering. Everything designed to look like a generous grandfather's reunion dinner. Timing coordinated, so Desmond and Celeste would feel social pressure to perform, to maintain their caring family facade, to dig themselves deeper while cameras rolled and witnesses observed. It wasn't just a dinner. It was a trap with 70 witnesses and high-definition documentation. Before I show you what happened the next day, are you still with me? Comment A if you think Desmond knew Stanley was setting a trap, or B if he was completely blind to it, and tell me in one short sentence why you chose that answer. Quick note, what comes next includes some recreated details added for emotional impact, but the core truth of what I discovered is real. The next afternoon, I tested a theory that had been forming since Desmond arrived. We were in the common area, him on his phone dealing with another Toronto creditor, call me pretending to read the newspaper. I spoke casually like an old man making conversation. That board seat retention clause in the March sale was unusual, I said. Most sellers don't negotiate that kind of ongoing involvement. Desmond looked up from his phone, and without thinking, without the careful filter he usually maintained, he responded. The 3-year board appointment with quarterly compensation, he said. Smart move ensures ongoing influence and ties your expertise to the company's transition period. Plus, the compensation structure was brilliant, tying it to performance metrics rather than flat fees. My blood went cold. That detail was never made public, I said quietly. The sale announcement mentioned board retention, but not the terms, not the compensation structure, not the performance metrics. How did you know about it, Desmond? His face went pale, the phone in his hand forgotten. I must have read it somewhere, he said. It wasn't published anywhere. I said, my voice deadly calm. Those terms were negotiated privately. Only 5 people knew the specific structure, me, my attorney, and 3 executives under strict confidentiality agreements. Desmond stood up, backing toward the doorway. Dad, I don't know what You've been tracking my finances, I said. Not since you arrived. Since the sale closed. Maybe before. Someone's been feeding you inside information about my business dealings. 1 year of tracking, 1 year of planning, 1 year of hunting his own father. He didn't deny it. That's what confirmed everything. How long? I asked. How long have you been watching my money? That's not... How long, Desmond? He straightened, and something shifted in his expression. The mask of the concerned son fell away, completely replaced by cold calculation. Since I heard the first whispers about the acquisition, he said. August 2022, 17 months ago. I've been monitoring every move you made, 17 months of surveillance. He'd been tracking me since before the sale even closed, positioning himself, timing his approach, waiting for the moment when the money was real and accessible. This wasn't desperation. This wasn't a son in financial trouble reaching out to family. This was premeditated predation. A calculated hunt that had been in motion for over a year before he rang my doorbell with 12 suitcases and manufactured reconciliation. I looked at him, this stranger who shared my DNA, and understood with absolute clarity that there was no redemption path left. No words that would bridge this gap. No love that could overcome this level of deliberate, methodical exploitation. Get out of my sight, I said quietly. He left. And I sat there processing the confirmation of what I'd suspected, but hoping wasn't true. My son hadn't come home because of financial desperation. He'd come home because he'd been stalking my assets for over a year, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. There is no redemption path left for him, only consequences. When did my daughter-in-law decide that humiliation was a valid weapon of war? The consequences I'd promised myself were about to become real. But first, Celeste needed to make her move. She announced it at breakfast on October 26th, the morning after I'd confronted Desmond, about his 17 months of financial surveillance. I've organized a small family reunion dinner, she said, her voice bright with manufactured warmth. Tomorrow night, just a few of your old friends, Dad, former colleagues, neighbors, people who care about you. You need community at your age. I looked up from my coffee, playing the confused elder perfectly. A dinner to celebrate family, she said, to show everyone how well you're being cared for, how blessed you are to have us here. Show everyone. There it was. This wasn't about community. It was about witnesses. She wanted to build a public narrative of devoted caregiving before I could accuse them of anything. Strategic reputation positioning. That's very thoughtful, I said, letting my hand shake slightly as I set down my cup. Celeste's smile widened. She thought she was winning. The dinner on October 27th was exactly what I'd expected: theater with an audience. She'd transformed my dining room into a stage set, complete with expensive floral arrangements and place cards, positioned to put me at the head of the table, surrounded by carefully selected witnesses. Former business associates, a few neighbors, people who remembered me from before. Walter Chen arrived first, a wiry man in his 60s, who'd worked alongside me during the company's expansion years. He still had the accountant's sharp eye for details that didn't add up, and I saw that eye narrow slightly as Celeste greeted him with effusive warmth. "Hi, no, Walter," she gushed. "Thank you so much for coming. Dad talks about you all the time. We're so grateful for people like you who remember him as if I were already dead." The dinner unfolded like a carefully choreographed performance. Celeste played the dutiful daughter-in-law, making sure my water glass stayed full, cutting my meat without being asked, speaking about me in the third person, as if I weren't sitting right there. Dad's been doing so well since we arrived," she told the table. "We were worried about him living alone, but having family around has made such a difference." Desmond nodded, playing his role. "It's been good to reconnect, to be here for him." I smiled and nodded, the grateful grandfather, while inside I catalogued every calculated word for the cameras that were recording everything. Halfway through the second course, Celeste's perfume hit me. Chanel No. 5, the same scent my wife had worn for 43 years. I'd mentioned Marion's signature scent in a tribute article the Lake Forest Gazette had published after her passing. Celeste had done her research. She'd done it deliberately. Another layer of manipulation, wearing my dead wife's signature scent to create some kind of twisted, emotional connection. Walter broke the script. "Interesting timing," he said, his voice casual but his eyes sharp. "The sale closing in March and the family reunion happening now. 7 months is quite a gap." The table went quiet. Celeste's smile froze for just a fraction of a second. "Life is complicated," she said smoothly. "Desmond's business in Toronto, the children's school schedule. We came as soon as we could arrange everything." "Of course," Walter said, but I caught the skepticism in his tone. He'd been an accountant for 40 years. He knew when numbers didn't add up. Celeste laughed, forcing the tension away. "More wine, anyone?" The dinner continued. The guests left. Celeste looked satisfied, like she'd won something. She had no idea the cameras had recorded every moment of her performance. 3 days later, at 11:47 p.m. on October 30th, I sat in my darkened bedroom reviewing security footage when I saw it. Desmond entering my library at 2:17 a.m. The infrared camera rendered everything in stark black and white, giving the footage a noir film quality that made what I was watching feel both surreal and damning. He went straight to my desk, pulled open the drawer, looked at something, a reference document I realized watching him compare it to another paper. Then he reached for my wall safe and opened it without hesitation. No fumbling, no trial and error. He knew the combination. My blood went cold. how I'd never input that code in front of anyone. The only other person who knew it was. I pushed that thought aside. Watch. Document. Understand first. Desmond extracted a document from the safe, set it on my desk next to what appeared to be a blank power of attorney form. Then he picked up my pen and began practicing my signature. For 11 minutes, I watched my son commit felony forgery in 4K resolution. His hand trembled. He made 3 attempts, crumpling 2 pages before achieving something that satisfied him. Then he photographed both documents, the original and his forgery, with his phone. When he finished, he looked up, staring directly at the bookshelf where one of the cameras was mounted. But he didn't see it. The camera was too well concealed, just a small lens behind a decorative book spine. He stood there for a moment, the forged document in his hands, and I saw something in his expression that made my chest tight. Not remorse, not even guilt, just desperate calculation. Then he put everything back, locked the safe, and left. The footage automatically uploaded to Vivian's secure server, time-stamped, authenticated, legally admissible evidence of felony fraud. I watched it a second time, making notes. Document identification, timeline, actions, everything a prosecutor would need. I watched it a third time, and that's when I saw it. 2:19 a.m., 2 minutes after Desmond entered the library. A figure walked past the library door in the hallway. Paused. The infrared camera caught the silhouette, clearly Iris in her nightgown, standing outside the closed door. She stood there for 5 seconds. Light showed beneath the door. She had to know someone was inside. Then she continued down the hallway without checking, without knocking, without investigating why someone was in my private library at 2:19 in the morning. She knew he was in there, and she didn't stop him. My 15-year-old granddaughter stands in the hallway holding proof of 12 years of lies, and I see my own anger reflected in her young face. Iris's betrayal walking past that library door while Desmond forged documents had shaken me. But before I could confront her, before I could process what household conspiracy might exist, Aria found me on Halloween night with evidence of her own. She appeared in the upstairs hallway at 8:47 p.m., clutching one of the returned letters from the basement box. Her face was flushed, her eyes red from crying, and her hands shook as she held out the envelope. "How long did they lie to me about you?" she demanded, her voice breaking. I looked at the letter in her hands, addressed to her 10th birthday, marked "Refused," in red ink, dated March 2018. 12 years. I said quietly. Every birthday, every Christmas, every time something important happened in your life. Returned to sender. "They said you didn't care," she whispered. "That after Grandma died, you just walked away, disappeared, wanted nothing to do with us." "I never stopped trying to reach you," I said. "Not for a single day." She crumpled the letter in her fist, and I watched 12 years of carefully constructed lies shatter in real time across her face. The anger, the betrayal, the realization that her entire understanding of family had been built on deliberate deception. "I have something else," she said, pulling out her phone. I've been collecting things, screenshots, text messages." She showed me her screen. Text thread between her and Celeste from 3 weeks ago before they arrived at my door. Celeste. "Remember to look concerned when you see Grandpa. He's old and probably confused. We need to show we care." Arya, okay. Celeste. "Performance is important, sweetheart. We're helping him, but he might not understand that. Act worried about him." My granddaughter had been coached to perform concern, scripted to display manufactured worry, taught to treat her grandfather like a role in a play. There are more," Arya said. "Lots more. About how to act, what to say, how to make it look like we came out of love when really..." She couldn't finish the sentence. "Then tell me how I can help you prove it." she said, her voice hardening into something fierce and determined. Tell me what you need, because I'm done being their prop. For the first time in 12 years, someone in my family chose me, and she was just a child forced to see what the adults refused to. When the time comes, I said carefully, I'll need you to stand as a witness, to tell the truth about what you've seen, what you've learned. Can you do that? Yes, she said without hesitation. Whatever it takes. 2 days later, I sat in Vivian Langley's downtown Chicago office surrounded by heavy legal volumes and the smell of expensive coffee. She'd assembled everything on her conference table like a general reviewing weapons before battle. Stacks of documents, each one indexed and cross-referenced. Digital files backed up in triplicate. Physical evidence cataloged with forensic precision. Camera footage, she said, pointing to the first stack. Every conversation, every coercion attempt, every moment of manipulation. Time-stamped, authenticated, legally admissible. She moved to the next stack. Medical evaluations from Dr. Castellanos. Cognitive assessments spanning 8 months, all documenting superior mental function. Any competency challenge dies here. Another stack. Postal records. Certified documentation of every refused package, every returned letter. 12 years of systematic alienation officially recorded. And finally, the piece that made everything else inevitable. The forgery, she said, pulling up the infrared footage on her laptop. 11 minutes of felony fraud in 4K resolution. This isn't just civil litigation anymore. Marcus Holt, sitting across from me, adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and added his findings. He was a forensic accountant Vivian had brought in, the kind of man who found poetry in spreadsheets, and he'd spent 3 weeks tracing every digital breadcrumb of Desmond's financial surveillance. The forensic trail shows financial surveillance dating back 14 months, Marcus said, sliding a report across the table. Bank account monitoring, property record searches, corporate filing alerts. He's been tracking every dollar since August 2022. Premeditated, Vivian said. Not reactive desperation, planned predation. Vivian's office felt less like a war room and more like a surgical theater, every instrument sterile, every incision planned. Witness list, she continued. Iris Whitfield documenting household interactions. Aria Frost testifying to parental coaching and discovered evidence. Dr. Castellanos certifying mental competence. Lloyd presenting financial forensics. And the dinner guests who witnessed the manipulation firsthand. Every frame, every receipt, every signature, all admissible, she said. This isn't designed for vengeance. It's designed for truth. Documented, unimpeachable truth. When I asked, soon, she said. The evidence package is complete. The irrevocable trust is filed and sealed. Your grandchildren are protected regardless of what happens next. Then she picked up one more document, placed it in front of me. There's something else, she said quietly. Something that accelerated the timeline. I looked at the document. Official letterhead. Illinois State Police Financial Crimes Unit. Legal terminology. Desmond has been subpoenaed to Lake County Court in 2 weeks, Vivian said. The forged POA, someone tried to file it with your bank. The bank flagged it as fraudulent and reported it to the State Financial Crimes Division. He tried to execute it. I said, my blood going cold. And triggered a criminal investigation, Vivian confirmed. She slid a second document across the desk. Criminal fraud investigation notice. Formal charges pending. Felony forgery with intent to defraud. This isn't family court anymore, she said. This isn't about inheritance or power of attorney disputes. Desmond isn't just losing access to your assets. He's facing prison. The room went very quiet. Does he know? I asked. Not yet, Vivian said. The subpoena will be served within 48 hours. Once that happens, everything accelerates. He'll lawyer up, probably try one final desperate move before the court date. I sat there processing what this meant. My son wasn't just greedy. He wasn't just manipulative. He'd crossed into criminal territory and the law had noticed. What happens next? I asked. Vivian looked at me with something like respect. We wait for him to make his move, she said. And we document everything. The ballroom glitters with crystal and malice as 72 years of my life becomes dinner theater for Chicago's elite. 48 hours after Vivian told me about the criminal charges, the subpoena was served. Desmond's face when that Ontario provincial police officer handed him the notice was something I'll remember forever. But Celeste had already organized tonight's dinner weeks ago, sent invitations, arranged catering. And in her calculated mind, proceeding as planned was the only way to maintain the facade that everything was fine. So here we are. December 10th. My ballroom transformed into a stage where my supposed decline will be performed for witnesses. The guests arrive at 6:30 p.m. in winter. Elegance, fur-trimmed coats, expensive jewelry, the particular confidence that comes from generations of Lake Forest wealth. Celeste greets them at the door like this is her home, like she's the gracious hostess welcoming friends to celebrate her beloved father-in-law. Father Stanley is such a blessing to have with us. She tells Margaret Brennan, a philanthropist I've known for 30 years. Though the years have been unkind, but we're so grateful to be here for him. The years have been unkind. Code for he's declining, we're saints for caring. I recognize 3 of the guests immediately, the same people who attended Celeste's October dinner. Walter Chen, the accountant with the sharp eye. Catherine Hollis, a former business partner's widow. David Morrison, who'd been at my company's 20th anniversary party. She's been building this narrative for months. Each dinner, each carefully orchestrated encounter, another layer of witnesses to their devoted care and my supposed cognitive decline. I shuffle into the ballroom, moving slowly, gripping the doorframe for support I don't need. Celeste appears at my elbow immediately. "Dad, careful!" she says loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "Let me help you to your seat." I let her guide me like I'm fragile. Grateful smile, confused blinking. The performance she wants delivered perfectly, while cameras mounted in decorative sconces record every calculated word. Desmond calls out Thomas Whitmore, a country club member. "It's wonderful you came back when he needed you most." Desmond, standing near the bar with Quentin Riddle, nods with manufactured humility. "Family comes first," he says. Dad raised me to understand that. The irony would be funny if it weren't so calculated. Quentin catches my eye across the room, raises his glass slightly. Silver-haired, smooth-faced, the kind of attorney who'd spent decades helping the wealthy protect their interests or steal them. He'd been here before, tried to get me to sign documents, failed, when Lloyd's medical evidence destroyed the guardianship scheme. Now he's back playing a different angle. Dinner is served at 7:10 p.m. Celeste has arranged the seating with surgical precision. Me at the head of the table, Felix placed beside me like an innocent shield surrounded by witnesses on all sides. Every smile I force, every tremor I fake, every confused pause, it's all evidence they're building against themselves, recorded in 4K, for a courtroom they don't know is coming. Between the second and third courses, Desmond makes his move. He stands, taps his wine glass for attention. Before dessert, I'd like to address something important. As many of you know, Dad's been having some difficulty managing his affairs lately. Nothing serious, he adds quickly, just the normal challenges that come with age. I watch faces around the table, some nodding sympathetically, others looking uncomfortable. So we've put together some simple estate updates. Desmond continues pulling papers from a leather folder. Just routine protective measures. Power of attorney medical directives. Things every responsible family handles. He slides the documents across the table toward me. White pages, official-looking headers, signature lines marked with yellow tabs. "Even just a signature, Dad," he says, his voice warm but his eyes cold. "Everyone here knows it's for your own good." I pick up the papers with trembling hands. Squint at them like the words are difficult to read. "I don't. What is this exactly?" Quentin Riddle stands smoothly moving to my side. "Mr. Frost, as an attorney myself, I'd be happy to explain. These are standard protective measures. They simply allow your son to help manage things when you're feeling confused or overwhelmed." Quentin's legal reassurances land like velvet-wrapped threats, a lawyer weaponizing professional credibility to coerce a signature. "But I have an attorney," I say slowly. "Vivienne. She handles my affairs." "Of course," Quentin says smoothly. "These don't replace her. They just allow your family to help when needed. It's actually quite common for someone in your situation." My situation? Declining, confused, in need of management. I set the papers down. "I'd like to read them more carefully first." Desmond's jaw tightens. Celeste's smile freezes. "Dad." Desmond says, his voice taking on an edge. "Everyone here is waiting. It's just a formality. Sign now so we can enjoy dessert." I pick up my wine glass instead, hand shaking enough to make the liquid tremble. "I'm sorry, I get confused with legal documents. Maybe tomorrow." The room goes quiet. Guests exchange glances. This wasn't supposed to be part of the script. Desmond leans close, his hand on my shoulder, his face near my ear. To the guests, it looks like a son offering gentle reassurance to his confused father, but his whisper carries the scent of desperation and expensive scotch, and his words are vicious. "If you don't sign now, I'll have you committed by midnight." I go very still. His hand remains on my shoulder, squeezing slightly. In his jacket pocket, I can see the edge of what looks like a physician's letterhead. "Official. Pre-signed. Ready to execute. I have the papers," he whispers. "I have a doctor's signature. One phone call and you'll be in a psychiatric hold by morning. 72 hours minimum. Maybe longer if they find you're a danger to yourself." These aren't estate documents on the table. These are involuntary commitment forms. And he's not bluffing. I look at my son, this stranger who shares my blood, and understand that desperation has made him capable of anything. He pulls back, smiling for the guests. "Just take your time, Dad. No pressure." But his eyes say, "Sign now, or I'll have you locked up before midnight." I look at my son's commitment threat at the 70 witnesses watching, and I say the two words that detonate everything: "Iris, please." Desmond's hand tightens on my shoulder. He thinks I'm asking for help, for someone to fetch water, for assistance with the trembling confusion he's been performing for these guests. He's wrong. Iris steps out of the kitchen doorway where she's been standing, witness to everything. The guests turn to look at her, the help, someone they've barely noticed all evening. Celeste's face flashes with irritation. "Well, I'm sorry," Celeste says with forced politeness. "But this is a family discussion. Perhaps you could—" "I need to speak," Iris says quietly, her voice cutting through Celeste's dismissal with calm authority. "With Mr. Frost's permission." I nod. She walks to the sideboard and picks up a leather-bound ledger I'd placed there this morning. Opens it to reveal pages of meticulous handwriting, dates, tracking numbers, amounts. "I've worked for Mr. Frost for 3 years, Iris says, addressing the room. "And when I started, he asked me to help him document something. 12 years of gifts sent to his grandchildren in Toronto. I kept every record." She turns to face Desmond directly. "She 147 refused postal packages," she said. "Every tracking number, every refusal stamp certified by the Lake Forest Post Office. Every birthday, every Christmas, Every graduation, every achievement. All returned to sender with refused stamps. Every single one bears your signature, Mr. Desmond Frost. The room goes silent. You could hear crystal ringing if someone breathed too hard on a wine glass. Iris reads from the ledger. September 14th, 2016. Aria's 5th birthday. Dollhouse and books. Returned refused. December 22nd, 2016. Christmas gifts for both children. Returned address unknown. She flips a page. September 14th, 2018. Aria's 7th birthday. Art supplies. Returned refused. Felix's 2nd birthday, November 10th, 2015. Building blocks and picture books. Returned refused. She continues, her voice steady, reading date after date, gift after gift. The guests are frozen, watching this housekeeper systematically destroy the abandonment narrative they've been fed. 12 years. Iris says, finally closing the ledger. 362 packages, all returned by Mr. Desmond Frost. Because I watched him try to reach those children every birthday, every Christmas for 12 years. While his son told everyone he'd abandoned them, Celeste stands abruptly. This is absurd. Why would staff interrupt a family matter with, because she's been documenting everything since September. I say, my voice suddenly clearer than it's been all evening. Every interaction, every manipulation, every attempt at coercion. She's not just staff, she's a witness. Watching Iris dismantle 12 years of lies with nothing but dates and receipts feels like watching truth wield a scalpel. Desmond's face has gone white. Those records they're fabricated, they have to be. The ballroom doors open. Lloyd Mercer walks in carrying a medical briefcase, the kind physicians use for house calls. The guests turn confused by the interruption. I apologize for the timing, Lloyd says, his voice professionally neutral. But Mr. Frost asked me to deliver something this evening. Medical documentation that seems relevant to the discussion at hand. He sets the briefcase on the sideboard, opens it with practiced efficiency, and pulls out official documents bearing hospital letterhead. Certified cognitive assessment from Dr. Castellanos, dated November 28, 2023. Lloyd reads, Mini mental state examination score 29 out of 30. That's superior function for a 72-year-old. He pulls out another document. Neurological evaluation, same date. No signs of dementia, no cognitive impairment, executive function, rated excellent. Another page. Psychiatric certification. Competent to manage own affairs. Competent to make legal decisions. Competent to execute contracts. 29 out of 30, better than most people half my age. Desmond tries to interrupt. Those tests are meaningless. He has episodes anyone who's been around him. Notarized. Lloyd continues, cutting him off. Court filed, and corroborated by 4 months of documented competence. Every evaluation conducted by Dr. Richard Castellanos, who's been board certified in geriatric medicine for 23 years. He looks directly at Desmond. Any attempt to claim incompetence will face these medical records in court. And they're already filed with the Ontario court system given the pending litigation. The criminal fraud investigation that Desmond thought was still secret. Celeste and Desmond exchange a look of pure panic. I don't understand, Walter Chen says from his seat. If Mr. Frost is cognitively sound, why has he been acting confused all evening? Good question, Walter. Sharp accountant's eye seeing the numbers that don't add up. I set down my wine glass. Let my hand go perfectly steady. No tremor. No shake. Then I stand, slowly, deliberately, letting every guest see what Desmond refused to acknowledge. My spine straightens completely. My shoulders square. My hands hang at my sides without a tremor. I look directly at my son with eyes that are sharp, clear, and absolutely aware of every calculation he's made. The frail old man they thought they were rescuing never existed. Performance. I say, my voice strong and clear. I've been performing the confused elder for months, documenting every attempt at manipulation, every coercive tactic, every lie told to justify stealing my autonomy. I gesture to the corners of the ballroom, where small cameras are mounted in decorative sconces. Every word spoken in this house for the past 4 months has been recorded. Every threat, every manipulation, every forged document. All of it captured in high definition and backed up to servers my attorney controls. Desmond stumbles backward, his face the color of ash. The commitment papers in your pocket, I continue. They're meaningless. Dr. Castellanos' evaluations make any involuntary commitment impossible. The documents you tried to get me to sign tonight, they're evidence of attempted coercion in front of 70 witnesses. I look at the guests, former colleagues, neighbors, people who've known me for decades. My son didn't return because he cared about me, I say quietly. He returned because he'd been tracking my finances for 17 months. Because he knew about the company sale. Because he wanted access to money he thought he could steal from a confused old man. The silence in the room is absolute. But I'm not confused, I say. I never was. The projection screen descended from the ballroom ceiling with a mechanical whisper that silenced 70 conversations at once. 70 elite witnesses who'd been sipping champagne and watching what they thought was a family dispute suddenly realized they hadn't been attending a dinner. They'd been attending a trial. I raised my hand. Iris touched something on her tablet. Desmond's voice filled the ballroom from speakers I'd had installed 3 weeks ago. She won't last a year in assisted living. The money will be ours by Christmas 2024. On the 12-foot screen, infrared footage showed my son and daughter-in-law in their guest bedroom October 19th at 11:47 p.m. Celeste's response played next. What if he fights the guardianship? He's 72 and confused, Desmond said on screen, his face ghostly in the camera's nighttime capture. Lloyd already confirmed the cognitive test results we need. I watched the audience. Chicago's financial elite sat frozen, champagne glasses suspended halfway to lips. This was the entry twist they hadn't anticipated, not just accusations, but Desmond's own words condemning him. Vivian stood near the screen, her expression professionally neutral. But I knew her well enough now to recognize the prosecutorial satisfaction in the set of her shoulders. The footage continued. October 21st. Desmond and Celeste in the kitchen at 6:18 a.m. Once we have POA, we move everything to accounts he can't access. Then the memory care facility in Indiana. Why Indiana? Celeste's recorded voice asked. Because Illinois has stronger patient advocacy laws. Indiana's easier. I heard gasps from 3 tables. Margaret Castellanos, the philanthropist who donated $4 million to elder care initiatives, stood abruptly. She didn't leave, she wanted to see more. Iris advanced the footage. October 30th, 2:17 a.m. My office captured by the camera I'd hidden behind the law books Marion had given me in 1982. Desmond sat at my desk, my insurance paperwork spread before him. He picked up a pen, my pen the Mont Blanc Marion bought me for our 20th anniversary, and signed my name on the beneficiary change form. 2 minutes and 11 seconds of high-definition infrared footage showing every stroke, every pause, every moment of deliberate forgery. At 2:19 a.m., Iris walked past the office door. The camera caught her silhouette, her distinctive gait. She'd seen the light under the door, I knew, because she'd told me the next morning. But she'd said nothing to Desmond, just continued to her room and documented the timestamp. "This is manipulated," Desmond said, his voice cracking. "Deep fake technology. The footage has been authenticated by 3 independent forensic video analysts. Vivian said calmly. Their reports are being distributed now. Staff members I didn't recognize. Vivian's people clearly moved through the ballroom with tablets showing verification documents to every table. But I wasn't done. Next recording, I said. October 27th. Desmond and Celeste at dinner with Walter Chen, the accountant who'd helped structure their Toronto investments. Celeste's voice. Once Stanley's declared incompetent, we'll have full control. Walter, you said you could move funds offshore within 72 hours. 48 if you need speed. Walter's recorded response came through clearly. Cayman accounts are already established. How does a father process this? How does anyone watch their child plot financial elder abuse with the clinical precision of a corporate merger? I'd had 3 weeks to absorb these recordings, and my hands still wanted to shake. I kept them steady. Chaktikichi. We have 47 hours of surveillance footage, Vivian announced. Documenting systematic planning of guardianship fraud, financial exploitation, and conspiracy to commit elder abuse. The Lake County State's attorney has reviewed all of it. Quentin Riddle stood. The attorney who'd brought POA papers to my home, who'd smiled his professional smile while facilitating my son's betrayal, now looked like he wanted to vanish into the marble floor. Thought I was retained under false pretenses, Quentin said loudly, addressing the room rather than me. My client misrepresented his father's medical condition and his own legal authority. I'm withdrawing from representation effective immediately. Yeah, you knew, Desmond hissed at him. You knew the whole... I knew what you told me, Quentin interrupted. Which appears to have been comprehensively fraudulent. My malpractice insurance doesn't cover criminal conspiracy, Desmond. Rats and ships, I thought. Amazing how quickly they jump. Vivian approached the screen with a laser pointer. This is your signature, Mr. Frost. She indicated the insurance form from October 30th. Yes, I said clearly. And this, she pulled up a comparison, my actual signature from the house sale documents, dated March 20th, 2023. The differences were obvious even from 30 feet away. The forged signature's S curled wrong. The T in Stanley crossed too low. The F in Frost had a loop my actual signature hadn't used since the 1990s, when arthritis changed my hand mechanics. 3 certified forensic document examiners have analyzed both signatures, Vivian said. All 3 concluded the insurance form was forged. The statistical probability of these variations occurring naturally is less than 0.03%. Desmond lunged toward the screen. Felix caught his father's arm, but Desmond shook him off with force that made Arya gasp. You are destroying your own son's future. Desmond screamed at me, his face purple-red in the chandelier light. I am your legacy, your only child. You would send me to prison rather than share what you spent 12 years stealing from me. The ballroom went absolutely silent, because there it was not grief, not desperation, not even anger, just naked entitlement echoing off 200-year-old walls while 70 witnesses documented every word. There is a particular silence that comes when a father disinherits his son in front of 70 witnesses. It sounds like the end of a bloodline. Desmond's screaming still echoed off the ballroom walls, but the room had gone utterly quiet. 70 pairs of eyes watched him stand there, purple-faced and shaking his entitlement naked and ugly under the chandeliers. I walked to the podium. Vivian stepped beside me carrying a leather portfolio I'd last seen in her Toronto office 3 weeks ago. I have one more announcement, I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. This was the moment I'd planned for, prepared for, built legal fortresses to protect. But planning something and executing it are different animals entirely. Vivian opened the portfolio and handed me the first document. On September 15th, 2023, I said, I established an irrevocable trust with the Illinois Circuit Court 6 weeks before my son arrived at my door with his 12 suitcases. $24 million, the complete proceeds from Frost Aerospace Solutions sale secured for my grandchildren, Aria Marie Frost and Felix James Frost. Aria gasped. Felix grabbed his sister's hand. The funds are held in trust until each grandchild reaches age 25. I continued. Access requires completion of undergraduate education and demonstrated financial literacy. The trust includes strict ethical requirements. No beneficiary may receive funds while under investigation for fraud, elder abuse, or financial exploitation of family members. Vivian's laser pointer highlighted the notary seal, the court filing stamp, the 3 sets of witness signatures. November 28th, someone in the audience repeated. A woman near the back, I recognized her as a trust attorney from one of Chicago's oldest firms, let out a low whistle of professional appreciation, because November 28th was 32 days before Desmond's October 30th forgery attempt. I hadn't just caught my son trying to steal from me. I'd anticipated it, legally preempted it, and locked the money away before he could even make the attempt. The trust documents include a no-contest provision. Vivian said, her voice carrying the clinical precision of someone who'd spent weeks making this bulletproof. Any challenge to the trust results in complete forfeiture of the challenger's interest and a $50,000 penalty donation to the National Center on Elder Abuse. Filed with Ontario Superior Court on November 28, 2023. Vivian continued. Irrevocable means irrevocable. No court can dissolve it. No family member can contest it. No power of attorney, no guardianship, no conservatorship can access it. I looked at my grandchildren. Aria had tears streaming down her face. Felix stood frozen, his 16-year-old mind clearly trying to process what this meant. What he protected us, Aria whispered to her brother. The whole time he was protecting us. Watching my grandchildren realize I fought for them while their parents tried to steal from them, that's not victory. That's grief with documentation. But I wasn't finished. To my son, Desmond Arthur Frost, I said, and the room somehow got quieter. I leave nothing. I let that sit for 3 seconds. For reasons documented in 47 hours of surveillance footage authenticated by 3 independent forensic analysts and currently under review by the Lake County State's Attorney's Office. For signature forgery on legal documents, conspiracy to commit financial elder abuse, and 12 years of systematic familial erasure. Desmond's face had gone from purple to white. He looked like a man watching his entire world collapse in real time, which was exactly what was happening. Celeste moved toward a cluster of women she'd served with on the Arts Institute board. Women she'd had coffee with every Thursday for 6 months, performing the role of devoted daughter-in-law caring for her confused father-in-law. This is a misunderstanding, Celeste said, her voice hitting that upper register desperation that never sounds good in high-ceilinged rooms. He's confused, we can explain. Barbara Whitmore, who donated the Institute's new sculpture garden, turned away without a word. The cut direct, I believed they called it. The social death sentence. And we saw the footage. Celeste, another woman, said, her tone colder than the December wind off Lake Michigan. We all saw. How does a woman who spent 6 months performing devotion recover when 70 witnesses watch the performance get exposed as fraud? She doesn't. Not in Lake Forest. Not in circles where reputation is currency and a single scandal can erase generations of careful social cultivation. I watched phones emerge from evening bags and suit pockets. Not to call anyone to text. By morning, every country club, every charity board, every private school parent association within 50 miles would know exactly what Desmond and Celeste had tried to do. The guests began filing out. Not in a rush. Lake Forest society never rushes, but with purpose. They'd come for dinner and witnessed a trial, a judgment, a public execution of two people's social standing. Margaret Castellanos stopped at the door, caught my eye, and nodded once. Respect, I thought. Or possibly just acknowledgement that justice, when properly documented, speaks for itself. Vivian began packing evidence folders into her briefcase. Iris collected tablets from the staff members who'd distributed forensic reports. Lloyd Mercer stood near the projection screen, hands in his pockets, watching the room empty with the satisfied expression of a man who'd helped build an unassailable case. The ballroom emptied until only family remained. Aria and Felix stood together near the front, still holding hands. Celeste had collapsed into a chair, staring at nothing. And Desmond crossed the ballroom floor. His footsteps echoed on the marble, steady and deliberate. He stopped 3 feet from me, close enough that only I could hear him. He locked eyes with me and whispered, his voice terrifyingly calm. "You think you've actually won." The confidence in his voice didn't match a man who'd just lost everything: his inheritance, his reputation, his freedom once the state's attorney filed charges. He smiled just slightly, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. He knew something I didn't. What does a man who's lost everything threaten when he has nothing left to lose? I found out the next morning. Desmond's confident whisper from the night before, that terrifying certainty in his voice, turned out to be exactly what desperate men always fall back on when evidence buries them: lawyers and lawsuits. December 11th, 10:30 a.m. He arrived at the dining hall with Quentin Riddle, who looked like a man fulfilling professional obligations while actively wishing he were anywhere else. "You defamed me in front of Chicago's elite," Desmond said without preamble, no greeting, no pretense of civility left. "That's actionable." I set down my coffee cup carefully. Iris stood near the kitchen doorway, her posture alert but calm. "I played a video of you in my home saying words you actually said," I replied. "Which part is defamation?" "The context was manipulated," Desmond shot back. "Conversations recorded without consent, edited to make me look." "The recordings are continuous, time-stamped, and forensically authenticated," I said. 3 independent analysts confirmed no editing. "You said those words. In my house. Planning to exploit me." Quentin shifted his weight. The attorney who'd brought power of attorney papers to my home with such professional confidence now looked like he'd rather be documenting traffic violations. "Mr. Frost," Quentin said, addressing me rather than his client. "I'm obligated to present my client's position, but I'd advise reconsidering litigation given the criminal investigation." There it was, the entry twist I hadn't expected. Even Desmond's own attorney didn't believe him. Quentin was going through motions, fulfilling ethical requirements to a client he'd rather drop, while actively signaling that pursuing this would be catastrophic. "You're supposed to be on my side," Desmond hissed. "I'm supposed to give you competent legal advice," Quentin replied evenly. "Which includes telling you when a lawsuit would be professional suicide. Truth is an absolute defense to defamation, and you're on video committing forgery." Desmond's face did that purple to white thing again. He stood abruptly, chair scraping against hardwood. "This isn't over," he said, the threat hollow even as he delivered it. But it was. We both knew it. 2 days later, I sat in Vivian's office on the 40th floor of a Toronto high-rise, Lake Ontario, stretching gray and cold beyond the windows. "Give him a choice," I said. "Sign a confession in front of Aria, or I hand the forgery evidence to prosecutors." Vivian leaned back in her leather chair, fingers steepled. She'd spent 30 years in courtrooms and boardrooms. Very little surprised her. This did, and this puts him between criminal charges and destroying his daughter's image of him forever, she said carefully. He made that choice 12 years ago, I replied. I'm just making him own it. Chodiho. The confession would need to be specific, Vivian said, already thinking through mechanics. Notarized. Admitting to parental alienation, to blocking contact, to lying about you for 12 years. Delivered verbally to Arya with witnesses present. And if he refuses, then the Cook County State's attorney gets everything. The forgery evidence alone is a Class 3 felony in Illinois, 2 to 5 years. Offering Desmond escape from prosecution felt like mercy, but forcing him to confess to Arya, that was justice wearing a velvet glove over iron consequences. He could choose between destroying his freedom or destroying his daughter's illusions. Either way, truth would win. Draw up the agreement, I said. Vivian drafted it in 48 hours. Desmond had until December 20th to decide. He took 2 days. December 14th, 8:45 p.m. I heard raised voices from the second floor. The bedroom I'd preserved, the one filled with 12 years of returned gifts and unopened birthday cards. I climbed the stairs slowly. The door was open. Arya stood in the center of the room, surrounded by wrapped packages and faded ribbons. Desmond faced her, backed against the wall like a cornered animal. Did you lie to me? Arya's voice shook, but she held her ground. 12 years old, my granddaughter demanding truth from the man who'd stolen her from me. For 12 years, did you tell me he abandoned us when he was trying to reach me? He's poisoning you against me. Desmond said the words, coming fast and desperate. He's manipulating you, showing you what he wants you to see, turning you into a weapon. Answer the question, Arya said. It's not that simple. Yes or no? Did you lie? Desmond's face twisted. The devoted father facade, the one he'd maintained for 12 years, through forced smiles and manufactured family photos, shattered completely. You don't understand what he did to your mother, he snarled. How he controlled her, used her, made her. My mother loved him, Arya interrupted. I've read her letters, the ones you returned. Dad helped me see my own strength. Dad believes in me when I don't believe in myself. Those are her words, not yours. Watching a father self-destruct in front of his daughter isn't victory. It's watching a building collapse with people still inside. I wanted to look away. I couldn't. Everything I did was to protect you, Desmond said. But the conviction was gone, the words empty. From what? Arya asked. From birthday presents, from Christmas cards, from a grandfather who set up a trust to protect me from you. Desmond lunged forward, grabbed her shoulders. I moved toward them, but Arya stepped back smoothly, breaking his grip. Oh, don't touch me, she said quietly. The silence that followed lasted maybe 5 seconds. It felt like years. Arya turned, walked to the doorway where I stood. She looked up at me, Marion's eyes, Marion's steel-wrapped in grace expression, and made her choice. I'm staying here, she said. With Grandpa Stanley, for winter semester. Not for the trust, not for the money. We hadn't even discussed logistics, hadn't talked about schools or arrangements. She was choosing relationship over financial security, truth over comfortable lies, healing over inheritance. I'd won legally, financially, socially. But this, my granddaughter choosing me, not because I'd trapped her or manipulated her, but because she wanted truth, this was the only victory that mattered. Sometimes the hardest questions come from 9-year-olds who haven't learned to lie to themselves yet. The morning after Arya chose to stay, I found Felix in the kitchen. December 15th, 8:20 a.m. He sat at the counter watching me pour orange juice, his legs swinging, because they didn't quite reach the floor. Grandpa, he said with the careful gravity children use when they've been rehearsing something in their heads. Does Daddy not love you? Is that why he did those bad things? My hands stayed steady pouring the juice. Steadier than they'd been in months, actually. Funny how the hardest questions can anchor you instead of shaking you. I set the pitcher down, pulled up a stool beside him. Real love is about protecting people, Felix, I said. It's about reaching out even when you get nothing back. It's never about taking. He processed this with the intensity of a child, trying to reconcile adult behavior with the simple rules they've been taught. Don't lie. Don't steal. Don't hurt people. Like how you kept sending us presents even though we didn't know, he asked. Yes. For 12 years. Yes. He picked at the edge of his placemat. I recognized the nervous gesture Marion used to do the same thing when she was working through something difficult. I heard you and Miss Vivian talking, Felix said quietly. Last week. About the videos and the papers and the forgery thing. I know what forgery is. We learned it in school. There was the entry twist I hadn't seen coming. My 9-year-old grandson had been listening to adult conversations for weeks, processing betrayal and fraud and parental alienation with the gravity of someone 3 times his age. How much have you heard? I asked. Most of it, I think, he said. Aria talks to me at night. She explained the trust and the inheritance and why Daddy tried to trick you into signing things. Children understand more than we give them credit for. They just lack the vocabulary to articulate it, the framework to categorize it. But they feel it, the wrongness, the betrayal, the gap between what parents say and what parents do. Are you angry at your father? I asked. I don't know, Felix said. And the honesty in those 3 words was more mature than anything Desmond had said in months. He's still my dad. But he did bad things to you. Can both be true? Yes, I said. Both can be true. He nodded, satisfied with permission to hold contradictions, teaching a 9-year-old about love, while his father prepared to sign a confession in another room. This was what winning looked like when everybody lost. 5 days later, December 20th at 4:30 p.m., Desmond returned. Quentin Riddle arrived first alone, carrying a briefcase that looked heavier than its physical contents. Vivian met him in the foyer. I watched from the living room doorway as they exchanged professional courtesies that meant nothing. Desmond entered 3 minutes later. No Celeste this time. No children. Just a man facing consequences alone. Vivian didn't waste time on pleasantries. Sign this confession, she said, laying the document on the coffee table, or I file the forgery charges with the Illinois State's attorney tomorrow morning. Desmond picked up the papers, scanned them. His face went through several expressions, rage, calculation, desperation, before settling on cold resignation. This is blackmail, he said. What this is prosecutorial discretion, Vivian replied. Your choice. Quentin cleared his throat. I've reviewed the document. It's legally sound. The confession admits to specific acts of parental alienation, falsified abandonment claims, and systematic blocking of grandparent contact over 12 years. Signature makes it admissible in civil court, but keeps me out of prison, Desmond said flatly. Yes, Vivian confirmed. I watched my son's face as he weighed options. Not remorse, I saw no trace of that. Just arithmetic. Prison versus humiliation. Criminal record versus signed admission of 12 years of cruelty. He picked up the pen, signed without reading it twice. The scratch of Mont Blanc on paper, that same pen he'd used to forge my signature, felt like the sound of something ending. Not healing. Not reconciling. Just ending. Quentin notarized it, his stamp hitting paper with bureaucratic finality. Vivian collected the documents, slid them into her briefcase with the satisfaction of someone who'd built an unassailable legal fortress and watched it serve its purpose. Desmond stood, straightened his jacket. For a moment I thought he might leave without another word, and honestly that would have been better. But he couldn't help himself. He stopped in the doorway, turned back to face me. I stood surrounded by evidence folders and legal documents, the architecture of my victory laid out in manila and leather. You won. Desmond said, his voice carrying that particular poison that comes from men who mistake legal consequences for personal vendetta. But you're still dying alone. He thought it was his exit line, his final strike. He still saw relationships as transactions, victory as possession. After everything, the surveillance footage, the confession, the trust protecting his own children from his greed, he'd learned nothing. I didn't respond. Didn't need to. Because upstairs, Arya was helping Felix with algebra homework. In the kitchen, Iris was preparing dinner for 4 instead of 1. In the guest bedroom I'd preserved for 12 years, my grandchildren's actual belongings now filled the drawers and closets, not returned packages, not ghost room shrines, but real socks and real textbooks and real evidence of real presence. Desmond walked out into December darkness, still convinced he understood what winning meant. He'd spent 12 years erasing me from his children's lives, then tried to steal everything I'd built. And in the end, all he could see was an old man dying alone because he'd never understood that love isn't about possession or inheritance or whose name appears on legal documents. Love is what reaches out for 12 years even when every letter gets returned. I closed the door behind him. The sound of the lock engaging felt less like victory and more like the beginning of something I'd stopped hoping for somewhere around year 12. Healing doesn't sound like triumph. It sounds like small footsteps on stairs and children asking impossible questions and second chances you never thought you'd get. On Christmas Eve, 2023, for the first time in 16 years, I set the table for 3. Desmond's parting shot that I'd die alone echoed for maybe an hour. Then Arya came downstairs asking if she could invite Iris to join us for dinner, and Felix started hanging ornaments on the tree I'd bought that morning, and the echo faded into what it always was, the last desperate strike of a man who'd lost everything and learned nothing. 6:30 p.m. The estate living room glowed warm with firelight, and the soft white lights Felix had insisted on stringing everywhere. Not the formal dining hall where I'd exposed Desmond before 70 witnesses. Just the living room for people, and the kind of quiet comfort I'd forgotten existed. Iris brought honey-glazed ham from the kitchen, her efficiency now familiar rather than professional. Somewhere in the past 2 months, she'd stopped being the housekeeper Marion hired and become something closer to family, the kind you choose through loyalty rather than inherit through blood. Arya had asked if she could read something before dinner. She held one of my letters from 2010 recovered from the postal archives, her hands careful with the 13-year-old paper. "My dearest Arya," she read, her voice breaking slightly on the words, "Though we haven't met, I carry a photo of you in my wallet. You have your grandmother's eyes, Marion's eyes, and I imagine you have her steel, too wrapped in grace the way she always managed." She paused, looked up at me with those eyes I'd written about when she was 2 years old. "You really carried my photo for 12 years, she asked. "Still do," I said. "Updated it when your father accidentally included you in a LinkedIn post in 2019. You were at some science fair." Felix stood from where he'd been adjusting ornaments and walked to the tree. He pulled something from his pocket, the woven bracelet he'd made back in October, the one he'd shown me during those first awkward days when he'd asked what love looks like. He hung it on a prominent branch right at eye level, treating it with the solemnity of a medal being awarded. "This bracelet is my promise, Grandpa," he said. "I won't forget like Daddy did." There was the twist I hadn't anticipated, my 9-year-old grandson making the choice to remember turning a child's craft project into a permanent reminder of the grandfather who'd fought 12 years to reach him. My legacy wasn't the trust fund or the legal victory. It was this, a woven bracelet on a Christmas tree, and 2 children who chose truth over comfortable lies. "You two are the best gift I never thought I'd unwrap," I said, and meant it more than any words I'd spoken in years. 4 days later, December 28th at 2 p.m., I sat in Vivian's law office for the final trust sealing. Lloyd Mercer had joined us, bringing the completed financial instruments that would protect my grandchildren's inheritance until they were 25. Vivian slid the final documents across her desk, 200 pages of legal architecture designed to be unbreakable. "We could include a conditional forgiveness clause," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "If Desmond demonstrates genuine reform over 5 years, therapy, financial restitution, documented changed behavior, you could allow limited access to family events." I considered it for maybe 10 seconds. "So no," I said. "Some bridges burn for a reason. The kids have access to him if they choose. I don't need to engineer redemption he hasn't earned." Declining the forgiveness clause didn't make me vindictive. It made me honest about what cannot be repaired and what I refuse to pretend away. Desmond spent 12 years weaponizing my absence. I wasn't obligated to build him escape hatches from consequences. "Then it's final," Lloyd said. 24 million ironclad, protected from all external claims. Your grandchildren are secure. I signed the documents with the same Mont Blanc pen Desmond had used to forge my signature. Reclaiming it felt appropriate. New Year's Eve arrived cold and clear. 11:50 p.m. I stood alone on the estate's master balcony overlooking the frozen expanse of Lake Forest. Below, lights from neighboring mansions reflected off snow and ice. Behind me, the house was quiet, Arya and Felix asleep in rooms that finally held their actual belongings instead of ghost shrine packages. The temperature hovered around 15 degrees. I should have been inside. But I needed this moment, this reckoning with what the year had cost and delivered. Desmond was gone. The family permanently fractured. And yes, the rejection still hurt in the way amputation hurts, even when the limb was diseased. You mourn what you thought it was supposed to be. But I no longer begged for seats at tables that erased me. Is it loneliness when 2 grandchildren chose you? Or is it freedom from people who only saw you as an inheritance? I thought about Mary and wondered what she'd make of all this. The surveillance cameras, the legal warfare, the ballroom trial. She'd probably call it excessive, and then admit it was also necessary, the way she always balanced my tendency toward either extreme caution or total commitment. "How Desmond said I'd die alone," I said aloud to the frozen lake, to Marion's memory, to whatever listens when old men talk to darkness. He was wrong about that too. The grandchildren I'd fought for were sleeping in rooms filled with 12 years of returned gifts, gifts that had finally reached them. Not through mail or courier, but through the harder route of truth and evidence and refusing to let lies become permanent. My phone buzzed. Text from Arya. "Can't sleep. Want to watch the midnight countdown together." I smiled, headed inside where warmth and chosen family waited. The year 2023 had taken everything: my son, my illusions about reconciliation, my hope that love alone could bridge weaponized absence. But it had also given me something I'd stopped hoping for around year 12: proof that truth outlasts lies, that protecting people matters more than being liked, and that dignity doesn't require validation from those who tried to erase you. Sometimes protecting an innocent generation means cutting loose the one that chose to become strangers. And to you listening to my story, remember this. For 12 years, I kept reaching out, hoping love alone would break through the walls Desmond built. Looking back, I should have documented from day one. Don't make my mistake of waiting, of hoping silently while evidence disappears. If someone is systematically erasing you from family, start building your paper trail immediately. Hope is beautiful, but documentation is protection. These grandpa stories you hear on this channel aren't just about revenge. They're about dignity, about refusing to let your life be rewritten by those who weaponize absence. I learned that protecting an innocent generation sometimes means cutting loose the one that chose to become strangers. My grandchildren chose truth over inheritance, relationship over money. I believe God orchestrated that in His timing. The trust fund protects them financially, but the real inheritance is showing them that love doesn't beg for validation from those who tried to erase it. Grandpa stories like mine remind us dignity outlasts theft. If this story moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you faced family betrayal? How did you protect yourself? Please share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Dad's Revenge Stories for more true accounts of fathers who refuse to be erased. Your support keeps these stories alive. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time means everything to me. One final note. While this story is based on real events, some details have been fictionalized for storytelling purposes and to protect privacy. Any resemblance to specific individuals is coincidental. What matters is the message, and I hope it reached you. God bless you.